The NFL draft is 2 days away, and it sucks not having a first round pick. You get excited about having a first round pick. I know how it feels. My team has been in the proverbial timeout before in the first round for multiple years at a time. So I know what the feeling is like. But just because you don't have a first round pick doesn't mean you don't go into the draft with a strategy and things that you're looking to get accomplished. And this is one of the drafts that I can remember in recent memory where not having a first round pick isn't the worst thing in the world, because if you've got multiple seconds, thirds, fourth, and fifths, you've got a chance to do some serious damage with the depth that exists in this draft class. So saddle up, guys, ladies and gents. We're going to have a draft pod extravaganza as we talk about the 2022 NFL draft and all that it entails. So buckle up. It's going to be one hell of a ride. The Louie T Network podcast starts now. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 257th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Late night Louie joining you tonight on the pod. My Memphis Grizzlies were on. I couldn't afford to miss this one. I wanted to come on a lot sooner. I started to have this thing at 9:30. There was no way I was turning that game off. No way in hell I was turning that thing off. So I said, I'm just going to push it out. And then next thing, 10 o'clock turned to 10:30. 10:30 turned into 11. But the Grizzlies got the win. Here I am. I'm in a great mood. I would have been probably a little bit PO'd had they lost that game. And I was in here, raising Cain. My wife was like, hey, you need to calm down. It's 10 o'clock at night. You're screaming at the top of your lungs. I was pissed off. We were doing a lot of stupid stuff that allowed the Minnesota Timberwolves to build a double-digit lead into the fourth quarter. Very frustrating stuff because I know we can play better basketball. But at the end of the day, they've never been here before. They don't know how to close a team out. They don't know how to make winning basketball plays. A lot of low IQ basketball players out on the court tonight, including a lot on the side of Memphis as well. So Jaren Jackson Jr. leading the crew there in the low IQ basketball department. But the play by Anthony Edwards at the very end, after hitting the biggest shot of the game, he turns around and makes one of the most boneheaded decisions of the game, going on the high side of that inbounds pass. I mean, the only thing you were supposed to do was keep Ja in front of you and don't allow him a direct line to the basket. Make him shoot something, a fadeaway, make him shoot a tough shot, make him give it up, make someone else beat you, but don't give him the one thing that he excels at, and that's going to the rim. And you put Jarrett Vanderbilt in a tough spot there, but either way, I'm excited. I cannot lie. I am excited. We're up 3-2. I knew this series was going to be tough. I wanted to do them in 5, but I said this team, they're just not going to allow us to do that. It's like looking in the mirror. I told you guys that when the series started. It's like looking in the mirror. They're a young team just like us. They don't know any better. Only difference is we've got playoff experience. A lot of people say, I don't want to go to the playoffs last year. We're not going to win. We're not going to do anything when we get there. I say, au contraire, my friend, especially in the NBA, not like other sports where playoff experience not as it's significant. Look at the Cincinnati Bengals, for instance. They had never been, none of those guys, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, none of those guys had been to the playoffs. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, none of those dudes. Maybe Boyd had been a little bit earlier in his career, but Jamar Chase, none of that. And it didn't matter. They went all the way to the Super Bowl. That doesn't matter in the NFL. Same with Major League Baseball. You get a hot team. They could be a wild card, and they can steamroll their way all the way to the World Series. In the NBA, you are not going to just show up and go all the way to the finals or your conference championship. You got to take your lumps. Even Golden State had to take their lumps once upon a time. You get in there, you get you some experience, and then you feel what it's like to play playoff basketball. The highs, the lows, the ebbs, the flows, the adjustments that's made game in, game out. And then once you take your lumps, you come back stronger mentally, and you learn what it's like to play playoff basketball, the intensity that you must have for 4 quarters, not 3, not 3.5. And that's been the problem with the Timberwolves is they've been good in spurts for quarters. In the game 3 debacle where they blew 2 20-point leads. They were great in first quarter, terrible in the second quarter, great in the third quarter, terrible in the fourth quarter. In this game, they were great for 3 quarters, to be honest with you. They started a little slow in the first quarter, revved it back up, ended up taking the lead. shot a ridiculous percentage in the first quarter. They made their free throws. They were ridiculous from three-point land. Again, they're the number one shooting three-point team in the league, so that's to be expected. We struggled, on the other hand, to make free throws. I've said this all along, and I know you didn't come here for basketball, so I'll just say this. If we lose in the playoffs, it'll be because of two things. One, we don't make free throws. That's been a problem all season long. We missed too many damn free throws, and luckily Ja got his act together in the fourth quarter and started making free throws when we needed them the most. And then we're inconsistent shooting the three. Like last game, we made 15. The game before that, we made 14. Tonight, we made 5. And it almost cost us. Like, you can't miss the amount of threes we missed tonight and expect to beat another team. We turned it over. We made foolish plays. But when it's all said and done, the Timberwolves are the younger team. They're the team with the lower basketball IQ. And those things usually show up and are very much highlighted in playoff basketball. But anyway, I digress. Tonight's going to be a big podcast. We're going to talk a ton of NFL draft. All 32 teams. We're going to take a look at what their strategy for the draft should be going into the weekend's festivities. And we'll talk about whatever else you want to talk about draft related under the sun. I'd love to hear from you guys. You know what we're going to do when we get to social media maneuvers. Open up the chat. Use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read. If you want to jump straight to the front of the line, super chats are the way to do that. So with that out of the way, all the pleasantries, table has been set. You know what time it is. Let's get after it, and let's get this podcast started with a gem dropping session. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind. Let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So, as I said at the open of the show, I know what it's like to not have a first-round pick and to be in timeout essentially for the first round. It's not fun. Everyone's talking about mock drafts, this, that, and the third, and you pretty much are just sitting on the sidelines. You know, you'll tell yourself if you made a big trade like the Raiders, hey, I got my first-round pick. His name's Devontae Adams. If you're sitting on the sidelines and you're the Miami Dolphins, hey, I got my first-round pick. His name's Tyreek Hill. You tell yourself these things to make you feel better, but at the end of the day, it still doesn't take away the sting of not having a first-round pick. It sucks. That said, you're not out of the draft totally, and there are things that you should be looking to acquire and positions to target and attack to make your football team better, to give you the best chance to succeed. And there's ways to go about that. There are areas of weakness on every single team. So let's go over those things right now, and we'll start with the division of the team that won the Super Bowl. Of course, the NFC West holds the champion, the Los Angeles Rams, who do not have a first-round pick, and they won't have a first-round pick until 2037. They don't care about first-round picks. And it's funny, people always talk about the Rams. Where are they getting all this money from? Well, here's essentially the skinny on the Los Angeles Rams and why they always have all this bread to spend. They're not spending a lot of money on first-round picks because they never have any. They are doing a lot of damage, and this is what makes the Rams successful. Yeah, it's great to have Jalen Ramsey. It's great to have Aaron Donald. It's great to have Leonard Floyd. It's great to go out and get Odell Beckham and Von Miller on rental deals. It's great to have all of those guys and those big names to come in and really bolster your football team and give you a chance. But those guys can't do it by themselves. You need a supporting cast. And what the Rams have done better than just about any other team in the league is they've sufficed without first-round picks. Hell, a lot of times without second-round picks. A lot of times with the Rams, their draft doesn't get started until the third round, okay? And what they've done is they've ate the draft alive in the middle to late rounds, getting guys like Fuller, the safety from Ohio State in the 7th round, finding gems like that. When they do happen to draft in the 2nd round, a guy like Cam Akers falls to them, and they're able to benefit there. Joseph Noteboom showed up big this year for them, getting guys like that in the 3rd round. They've continued to do these things, finding guys like the cornerback last year, Darius Williams, who they got off the scrap heap, pulled him in and got him to play exceptional football for them the last 2 or 3 years. Like, these are the things the Rams have done, finding gems like Micah Kaiser and another guy, Reader at linebacker. These are the things you have to do. You have to find Joseph Sebastian Day to be able to supplement the guys that you're paying a boatload of money to. You got to find a lot of guys that you don't have to pay a lot of money to and hit on 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th rounders and undrafted guys. And that's what the Rams have done. They're going to continue to look to do that. They did it again. They did it again this offseason, going and getting Allen Robinson. They were sniffing around Stephon Gilmore, the star corner. So they still got more money that they're looking to spend. At the end of the day, they couldn't get Von Miller back in the fold. So if you ask me and this is a deep draft for edge rushers, when they finally get into the fray, the Rams should be targeting a couple of positions. I know receiver looks like it's, good now with Allen Robinson coming on board to join Cooper Kupp. You still have Van Jefferson and guys like that. I still think you need to add another wide receiver. And that's why they were in constant communication with Odell Beckham Jr. Like, hey, we would be interested in bringing you back when you're healthy. I think he's going to ultimately go in a different direction. But when it's all said and done, I think the first order of business for them is to go find edge rushing help. Okay. You need to be able to take some of that pressure off of Aaron Donald. It's good to have Leonard Floyd, but Gumby needs help as well. That's where a guy like Von Miller, who was spectacular in the Super Bowl, comes into play. I think they're going to look to address that void that's left there. I think they're going to have to go shopping for some cornerback help. That's why Stephon Gilmore was on their radar, because, you lose Darius Williams this offseason. They haven't really replenished that position. They lost Troy Hill last year in the offseason to the Cleveland Browns. So they really need to do some work at the cornerback position. So I expect them to be aggressive at corner, edge rusher, and I think they're going to go and attack receiver as well. And I wouldn't be shocked if they did something at tight end too. But this is a team that they don't have many holes on their roster. Obviously, you lose your left tackle, who was not only a stalwart for you, but also a team leader and a guy that was so consistent in Andrew Whitworth. That's another position that you're probably going to see, not necessarily just left tackle, but just more offensive line depth if you are the Los Angeles Rams. So I think they're going to continue to attack the draft as they have in past years with aggression in the mid rounds, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and try to win the draft there. That's where the most value is in this year's draft, starting with the 2nd round and probably topping out at the late 5th, maybe even into the early 6th round. You can still come away with some really talented football players. And that's where the Rams have done a lot of their damage over the last 4 or 5 years. Anyhow, if you look at the next team in that division, the San Francisco 49ers, who played these same Rams in the NFC Championship game, I think obviously the first thing they've got to figure out is this Deebo Samuel saga. I mean, there is so many layers there with that situation. I've even heard it being something as simple as he just wants to be closer to home. And we've heard that with guys before, where they weren't comfortable being as far away from home. Marshawn Lynch talked about being in Buffalo, and it wasn't about Buffalo. It was just he was too far away from home. He wanted to be closer to home, which is why Seattle made a lot more sense for him. And you see it with guys all the time that they're not comfortable. Amari Cooper's another guy. I don't think he was comfortable being all the way out on the left coast. And when he went to Dallas, his game, you could see it flourish and take another step. He just wasn't comfortable being away from home. And you see that with some guys. I think they're just more comfortable being closer to home. So it wouldn't shock me if that's all it was for Deebo Samuel, just wanting to be closer to South Carolina, where he's from. But in any event, they got to figure that situation out, because you're going to start Trey Lance. Your young quarterback needs a number 1 wide receiver. And whether it's Deebo Samuel coming back and you mend fences there, or you got to go get another guy, you got to figure this thing out. Because right now, the 49ers are trying to play hardball. They're saying they're not going to trade him. Well, if he's not going to play, you need to be able to recoup some draft capital so you can replace his production as a number 1 receiver. This is a draft where you can go and get you a number 1 wide receiver. The 49ers currently don't have a 1st-round pick. So if you're really interested in replacing Deebo Samuel, now's the time to strike while the iron's hot. The Jets have been desperate all offseason to get a veteran wide receiver to give them a number 1 option for Zach Wilson. And so if that phone rings, and you can't sit here and play hardball if you're San Francisco, that's the one thing you cannot go into the season with out, is a number 1 target for Trey Lance to get the football to. Like, if you want that young man to succeed, the best thing you can do is get him a number 1 option to get the football to. So they got to figure that out. I think after that, when you look at the 49ers, I think the next thing they really need to do is really first, they need to get healthy. They've had some injuries over the last couple of years, but I think the next target area is the secondary. I think safety and cornerback have been problem areas for them that they need to shore up. They've been getting away with, putting random guys out at the cornerback position and getting production out of them. But, at some point you can't throw, Dick Sherman out there, or some aging veteran, Josh Norman, or one of these. You can't keep throwing Band-Aids on the problem. You need to actually go out and get you a real corner. And so I think that's something they really need to, turn their focus and attention to, is getting a cornerback there that can help. They're getting a little long in the two safety positions, Jaquaski Tartt and guys like that. They need to really shore up that back end. So I think those are some target areas for them, along with wide receiver. Even if you get Deebo Samuel back, I think you need to add another guy in the mix. There's some solid receivers there, but I don't think they've been overly impressed with Brandon Ayuk, even though he started to come on towards the end of the season last year. Jennings is cool as a fourth option. I don't love him as a third option. I think you could add another guy in there if you're the San Francisco 49ers. I'm not talking about Trent Sherfield either. You need another real option for Trey Lance to get the football to. I think offensive line-wise, you could always add depth there if you're the 49ers. But to me, up front, I'd like to see a little bit more done in the interior. Obviously, you'd like to get your former first-round pick from a couple of years ago from South Carolina back in the fold, get him healthy, and see if you can't get him to produce at a high level. But to me, the real target area is secondary, wide receiver, regardless of Deebo Samuel comes back, offensive line depth. These are things that the 49ers should be targeting in the upcoming draft. You look at the other team in that division that made the playoffs. 3 teams from the NFC West made the playoffs, and that would be the Arizona Cardinals. A really busy offseason for the Cardinals. They saw a lot of guys, big name guys, leave their football team, and they weren't able to replace them via free agency. So the draft is going to be huge for the Arizona Cardinals. They've got a saga of their own on their hands with Kyler Murray. I think that's going to be resolved. Obviously, their GM, Steve Keim, already came out and said, look, we're not trading Kyler Murray, and that's the right thing to do. Look, teams can't keep giving away franchise quarterbacks in the prime of their careers or going into the prime of their careers. Can't be like the Houston Texans. You got to fix these situations because these guys don't grow on trees. They're so hard to find when you get one. Even though I'm not the biggest Kyler Murray fan, I acknowledge the man is super talented and one of the better quarterbacks in the league. You have to make sure that you get that guy on the board with whatever you're doing in the direction of your program. That said, I think they're going to figure that out, but they lost a ton this offseason. They lost Chandler Jones as an edge rusher. They lost Christian Kirk. They also lost a guy that I think is underrated in that offense, and Chase Edmonds, all in free agency. So they've got a lot of work to do. I thought getting A.J. Green, it's A.J. Green, back in the fold was huge for them. It eliminates one more issue that they would have had to have solved. So they still have to address running back. A lot of people are just dismissing running back in the first round as if they won't be one taken. I think the first team that actually makes sense to take a running back is Arizona. I don't think they will, but I wouldn't be shocked if they did. Buffalo is another team that I could see investing in a running back first round. Outside of those two teams, I don't think anybody else will. But that said, I could see them going running back. I could see them going wide receiver. I think they should go wide receiver. That to me right now is where their team is built on the offensive side of the football. Defensively, they're going to have to replace Chandler Jones. And he missed a bulk of time last year, but it's not ideal to go into the season without a edge rusher, a guy that you trust to get to the quarterback. Also, I think linebacker is something else that they need to address in this draft. I think they've got a lot of talented pieces on that football team. They got Zach Ertz back, so that's good. It alleviates a tight end need. But you lose all of those pieces. You need to replenish them. I think it starts with receiver, then running back, edge rushers in there. Again, deep draft class for edge rushers, so you don't have to rush. I don't think the value where they sit at 23 in the first round is where edge rusher value is going to be for them. I think if you're the Arizona Cardinals, maybe the second round is when you start to turn your attention to edge rusher. Maybe the value may be a little bit greater. It just depends. I say that the board could fall in a way to where I highly unlikely that Double J is sitting there for them to take. I think he's going to be a top 15 pick. I easily could be a top 10. I mocked him as a top 10 pick to the Atlanta Falcons. He could go even earlier than that, but highly unlikely that a guy like that falls to you. But I don't want you reaching at 23 for a Boye Mafe or somebody, or a Mafe Boye or someone like that. I don't want you reaching for a guy that, I won't be there for for you to take in the second round, but there will be some value. There will be some other edge rusher that can give you some juice off the edge at a later date and time. So we'll see what the Arizona Cardinals do. But obviously, edge rusher, wide receiver, and running back are all needs for the Arizona Cardinals as they enter the draft. You get to the final team in that division, and they're in full rebuild mode. The Seattle Seahawks, I really can't tell you what they're doing right now. The fact that they moved on from Russell Wilson this offseason, they got a bunch of pieces in return. It's going to help jumpstart their rebuild, but they got to have a quarterback, right? And I don't know if this is the draft for them to acquire one. I know the idea isn't to roll out Drew Lock and have him be the answer. So my gut tells me they do something in this draft. It may not be at 9 overall. Maybe they go get an offensive tackle at 9 if one sits there that they really covet. They could go in another direction. They could go safety. They could go corner. I mean, they could use some of everything. They're really a destitute roster right now in Seattle. They could use a little bit of everything. So outside of wide receiver, where you've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and you just drafted. You only had one draft pick last year. I've never seen anything like it. The Seattle Seahawks had one draft pick last season, and it was Dwayne Eskridge. That was it. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it. So you've got receivers. If you're Seattle, that's the one place where you're set. And then I guess getting Noah Fant gives you another option at tight end, so you may be set there as well. But Gerald Everett was a 1-year rental; he's now gone and moved on. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. They've got they could take a guy at just about any position, and it makes sense for them. I think running back's another position that they could steer clear of and be fine. But outside of that, they could take offensive line, they could take corner. They need a quarterback clearly. They could take safety, they could take linebacker. They moved on from Bobby Wagner. They moved on from KJ Wright the year before, and clearly they drafted a first-round linebacker a couple of years ago in Jordan out of Texas Tech. But still, they need Jordan Brooks. They need help everywhere. So really the strategy for Seattle is just get good football players. And, in typical Seattle Seahawks fashion, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded back 2 or 3 times and tried to fast track this thing and get 15 picks out of this draft. We'll see what they decide to do. But at the end of the day, they've got a lot of work to do. They've got a ton of work to do. So then we move on. Let's get to some of these comments. You guys are super chatting. We'll go to the next division after I knock out a couple of these super chats. Just Andre, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, I'm worried this is going to be like Payne and Geis, except with London and Brisker. I don't mind Brisker, but I'm not big on London. Look, it is what it is. I've come to the realization that more likely than not, they want to add size. That's a Rivera thing. That's his philosophy. I'll never knock a man for going with his philosophy. We all have philosophies. We all have types of players that we like. When we see a guy, they don't fit our, philosophy, our philosophical beliefs. And so we move on to the next guy. And that's the beauty of the draft. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You look at a player, you say, oh my God, this guy's a stud. I look at the same guy and say, I don't like his game. I don't think he translates well to the NFL. You ask another person and they're like, he's okay. I take him, but I'm not, drooling over him. I'm not trading up to go get him. And so you got 3 different people, 3 different opinions on the same player. And that's the beauty of the draft. You ask 32 different GMs around the league about one guy, and you may get, a variation of 32 different opinions. You may have, 15, 16 of them feeling like, hey, I'd take that guy with a first round pick. You may have 8 of them that says, I wouldn't touch that guy to the 3rd round. And then you got another set that says, hey, that guy's 2nd round value. I'd love to get him in the 2nd round. So it's amazing. It's amazing to see how everybody views the draft and views players in particular. But I'm not a Drake London guy. But it doesn't matter what I think. It's what they think. And ultimately, they're going to make the decision that they think is best for the team. Alexander the Great. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, Alexander the Great. Writes, just showing some love. Hit that like button. Y'all heard Alexander. Really appreciate you, Alexander the Great. The Great. Y'all heard the man. Hit the like button. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. And also make sure that you comment, add value to the comment section as well. So thank you for that, Alexander the Great. Pit Fight Entertainment. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Pit Fight Entertainment writes, what up, Lou? What's going on? He says, Washington fan from the Dominican Republic. Okay, good to hear from you. All right. He says, my brain is saying go offense and help Wentz with the 11th pick, but my heart is really hoping Kyle Hamilton slides to us at 11. Can I tell you a secret? Pit Fight Entertainment, my guy from the Dominican. I think I secretly feel the same way. I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. Secretly, I would love it. And I said this before. This isn't something that I haven't said in the past, but I haven't said this said it in this way. I've said that I would love to see Kyle Hamilton be on the board to see what Washington does. But I'm actually going to take it a step further. I would love to see him on the board and for them to take him at 11. Like secretly, that's what I want. And then you can double back, get a receiver. I'd be anxious to see what they did at 47. I'm going to tell you something. If they don't take a first round wide receiver, I wouldn't be shocked if they just didn't take a receiver altogether. I think they're higher on their receiving core than we think they are. Like I listened to Ron, and we'll have this conversation tomorrow on the show. For those of you out there that are Washington fans, we will have a very spirited discussion tomorrow night. Washington on the clock on the Command Post Live. It's going to be live and lit tomorrow. Make sure you join us for that one at 9:30 p.m. It's going to be a hell of a show. But with that said, we're going to talk about Ron and Martin Mayhew's presser and what was gleaned from it. And one of the things I heard Ron say, and I've heard him say this before, and when Ron speaks, I'm telling y'all, do not dismiss what this man is saying. He's telling you things for a reason. He's like, yo, I really think we got a good, supporting cast around him already. But they do want to add to it. I don't want to make it seem like Ron wasn't interested in adding to it. But he's like, yo, we like what we saw at, John Bates last year. Diami's going to be a year better. We're getting Curtis Samuel back. Of course, we got Terry. We got, Sims coming back, Cam Sims. Like, Dax Milne is developing, and we like what we saw out of him in some limited play. So they think that their receiving core is actually pretty good as is. They still want to add to it. And we keep assuming it's going to be a receiver. Maybe it's a tight end. We'll see. I, like you, secretly would prefer us to take Kyle Hamilton. I think he's a game changer defensively, and we could use one. But I'm in the opposite boat as you. Your gut, you say your brain is saying go offense. My gut is saying go with the offensive side of the football. My head is like, yo, I would love to add Kyle Hamilton to this defense, but my heart and my gut are like, bro, how many years in a row are you going to draft defense in the first round? It's finally time to go offense and start addressing the elephant in the room. You can't score enough points. That's your problem right now in Washington. You don't score enough points. Part of the reason is you don't invest on the offensive side of the football till it's too late. Get a guy that's had a chance to be elite at 11, and we'll figure out the rest moving forward. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not that far away from the way you feel. So John Livingston, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, JL Smooth, writes, what up, Lou? He says, hope all is well, my man. Likewise to you, JL Smooth. He says, thoughts on Andrew Booth Jr. and Trent McDuffie. They both have been mocked to the Bills more than anyone. I had you taking Andrew Booth Jr. in my initial mock draft, but then I continued to do homework on Andrew Booth. He's got tendonitis in his knee, something that has plagued him all the way since high school. He's had to get it drained multiple times. I don't like guys that are dealing with tendonitis in high school because to me that's speaking to a larger problem there. He's also had other surgeries, core surgery, things of that nature. He's got a lot going on with him that I don't necessarily love. But again, modern science and technology, these guys, they're back just like that, and they're fine. So he's super talented. There's no doubt about that. McDuffie will be long gone. You don't even need to ask about Trent McDuffie. He'll be gone before you even have a chance to get a sniff at him in the 20s. However, Booth will be there, and another guy, the Washington cornerback. Why am I blanking on his name? I can see his face with the damn cornrows. Yikes! I don't know why I can't think of his name, but that's the one I mocked to you guys. Matter of fact, let me pull out my mock draft and I can tell you his name because it's going to kill me if I can't give you his name. Kyler Gordon, the other corner from Washington, is another guy. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills went running back. That might be the best value for you, as you get, 25, 26, wherever you guys are in the draft. That might be the best value for you is going running back. But corner is definitely the biggest need. No more Levi Washington. He moved on, or Levi Wallace, excuse me. He moved on in free agency, and you don't have a guy. And then also you have Tre'Davious White coming off of a major knee surgery. So clearly you need cornerback help. And I think that's probably what you decide to attack first. But I wouldn't be shocked if you went running back. Trent McDuffie is, to me, the most polished corner in the draft. Yeah, he's a little undersized, but he's the most polished corner in the draft class. I just think Washington defensive backs are the best coached in the nation. That includes Alabama cornerbacks. I think Washington, they just churn out really good corners. You look at the couple of guys on the secondary members for that matter, not just corners. You look at the couple of guys on the Arizona Cardinals roster, both are super talented coming from that Washington program. Last year, I loved the corner that the Titans ended up taking as a nickel, Elijah Molden. Thought he was spectacular. And, this year they got another 2 guys coming out of that secondary. So I think they're just extremely well coached. And I think you have a chance to get your hands on one of them. So we'll see what happens. It'll probably be Andrew Booth when it's all said and done, but I wouldn't dismiss Kyler Gordon either. Kyle, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Kyle writes, where a team needs to trade up to land Thibodeau. I think he won't go. There's a chance he won't go 1 or 2. I think he really starts to come into play at number 3 for the Texans. I don't think they're going to take him at 3. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. I think 4 with the Jets is where if you really want him, you're going to have to trade up to 3 to get him, unless the Jets are willing to move back. And I don't think the Jets are looking to move back from 4. They may be looking to move back from 10, but they're not looking to move out of 4. When you're the Jets, when you're a team that bad year in, year out, you need elite talent. You earn the right to draft 4th overall. You need to take advantage of that by getting a player that can help you move the needle. So I don't think they're interested in moving out of 4. I think the Texans are a team that may be interested in moving out of 3 because they need so much stuff and they're so far away. Whereas the Jets are like, look, we already got the quarterback. We got a head coach that we believe in. We got pieces. We're trying to go out here and acquire a veteran receiver to be our number 1. Like, we feel like we got a chance to do damage right now. So they're really trying to push that envelope, so to speak. Whereas the Texans are like, look, man, shit's wide open for us. We know we're not a good team yet. We're still building this thing. We got a brand new coach yet again, 3rd year in a row. We've got a brand new head coach in Houston. So we're trying to figure some shit out. So, the more the merrier. The more players we can get, the better off we'll be because of it. So they're still turning over that roster in Houston. You'd have to get up to 3 in order to really realistically have a shot at Kayvon Thibodeau, because I don't see him getting past 4 with the Jets, but I could be wrong. We'll see. But I think that's how high you'd have to go to get him. John Livingston, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. JL Smooth, who writes, was in a Jets draft stream earlier. Wish you took calls, by the way, Lou. I think you maybe did at one point. I did. He says, think they are going to are getting Debo tonight. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. I told you that Joe Douglas has been as aggressive as we've seen a GM be in terms of trying to get a number 1 wide receiver. Like, he's made no secret. It hasn't been a secret around league circles. He's mixed no words and made no bones about it. He tried to get Tyreek Hill. We know he was in the runnings, and up until the 23rd, the 25th hour, I should say, 23rd hour, however you want to say it, the Dolphins swooped in. They were the number 1 lead candidate to get him. And then the Dolphins swooped in, and he ultimately wanted to go there, and the Dolphins got it done. But they wanted Tyreek Hill. We've already heard rumors that they offered the number 10 overall pick to Seattle for DK Metcalf, and the Seahawks flat out told them no. So clearly he is on a mission to get a number 1 wide receiver. A lot of people are saying, just sit at 10 and draft one. You may have the chance to draft the very first receiver in the 2022 NFL draft. But I think his mindset is, I don't want any more young players at that position. We already got Elijah Moore, and I think they have some veterans. They just re-signed Braxton Berrios, who played really well last year. I think Jamison Crowder is back. He might have moved on. Actually, I think he's still in that division. I think he moved on to like Buffalo or somewhere like that, where he'll really flourish. Or Miami, or I think it's one of those teams. He's Miami, somewhere in there. He's still in that division, if I'm not mistaken, but he's no longer in New York. But they got Braxton Berrios back. Obviously, they got Corey Davis. That's another veteran, but none of these guys are number 1s. I love Elijah Moore. I think he has the talent to be a number 1, but they clearly want a number 1 guy for Zach Wilson. And Joe Douglas is willing to stop at nothing to get that done. And he would prefer it to be a veteran. And so I think they're going to trade, like the 49ers. It's lion season. Oh, we're not trading them. We're not listening. This is a good football player. Yeah, I understand that. You got Trey Lance sitting over there in limbo, waiting to see what the hell's going to happen, because if you don't act now And all of a sudden, Debo's like, I'm not playing for y'all. I'm not playing with y'all. I'm not playing for y'all. And he decides to play hardball and he sits out. And yeah, he can get fined, this, that, and the third, whatever the case may be. If he decides to pull that card and you don't have a number one, because you're not getting one after the draft, if you don't get one prior to or during the draft by trading Debo to get the draft capital that will allow you to net a number one wide receiver or a potential number one, then you're going to go into the season with Trey Lance having to rely on guys like Brandon Ayuk and Jennings and guys like that. And you're putting that young man in a tough spot as a first-year starter. So the 49ers have to do something. And clearly, I don't think Debo's playing with their ass. I think he wants out, and they got to figure it out ASAP. So I could see something getting done there. To me, that's the only logical destination for him is the Jets. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, we move on to the next division. And you know what? That we'll go to let's stay in the NFC. Let's knock the NFC out first, since we started there with the Super Bowl champion Rams in that division. Let's stay in that division. We'll go to the NFC North, where the Green Bay Packers reside and company. So we'll start with the Packers. That's a team that clearly needs help at receiver. So they're going to attack the receiver position in the first round. This is a team that hasn't drafted a first round receiver since I can't remember when. I'd venture to say the last time they drafted a first-round receiver was Javon Walker, and I could be wrong about that. It could have been someone else. That's the last guy that I remember with first-round talent that was in Green Bay. So it's been a long time. Just know that. It's been a long, long time since they spent a first-round pick on a receiver. That drought ends this year. They got 2 first-round picks, theirs and that of the Raiders. They're going to spend one of those 2 first-round picks on a wide receiver. It's just funny. After looking at my mock draft and kind of taking a step back, doesn't it seem like Christian Watson just belongs in Green Bay? I don't see them spending 22 on him, but I could see them spending 28 on him. That said, they're going to attack the wide receiver position. I think they could also use an upgrade on the offensive line. They always have injuries. They also always have some things going on, shuffling around pieces on that offensive line. They could use some more help there. Linebacker is always a problem in Green Bay. It seems to continue to be one. They also moved on from one of the Smith bros this offseason in Zadarius, who's now gone. They need to address edge rusher. So there's different avenues that they can take, but receiver to me is where it starts for them. Offensive line also could use a shot in the arm. Edge rusher, linebacker, those are big positions of need, if you ask me, with the Green Bay Packers. You move on to the next team in that division. It's the Minnesota Vikings. And so this is a team that just wholesale changes. And you know what? It was time. Rick Spielman, his time had come and gone. Same with Mike Zimmer. Zimmer! It was time for the old guard to be pushed out and some new blood to come in. They've got a new GM now who is one of these Moneyball outside the box thinkers. We'll see what he does in his first offseason, specifically in the draft. You got a new head coach here now. And so when you look at what they've done, offensive-minded head coach, and they've got all the pieces offensively that you would think that they would need. I always can upgrade the offensive line. Minnesota's always got issues up front along the offensive line. When healthy, Dalvin Cook and Madison are a nice little 1-2 combination at the running back position. Clearly, you got Justin Jefferson, one of the best receivers in football. You've still got Adam Thielen. I thought that KJ Osborne stepped up massively last season. So that gives you a little bit more confidence that, hey, we don't necessarily need to, go above and beyond at receiver, but it wouldn't hurt to add another receiver to the mix if you're the Minnesota Vikings. Clearly, not having Irv Smith Jr. hurt last year, and you lost who I thought was a really good complimentary tight end, the kid out of Central Michigan, who's moved on, way more athletic than I gave him credit for. He moved on in free agency as well. So I think tight end is another position that the Vikings should be attacking. But really, it's all about the defense. The Vikings offensively have been good enough the last 2-3 years to be a playoff team. It's been the defense, coincidentally enough, which has really held them back, which used to be the strength of that team. They're getting old at a lot of positions. Edge rusher, to me, is a problem. You keep having injuries to one of the better young pass rushers in football, in Danielle Hunter. You don't have anybody opposite of him. I think the leader in the clubhouse was the kid from South Carolina that you drafted a couple of years ago. But I think you use some more, help there. Inside at defensive tackle is another problem area. I think you could use some help there. You're getting a little bit older at linebacker. Some of these guys starting to get up there. Dirty Harry's getting up there in age. So is Kendricks, and Barr isn't too far behind. So I think that linebacker core could use an infusion of youth as well. Clearly, cornerback. Patrick Peterson coming back is a godsend, because that's been a position that it's funny because every year the Vikings would draft a first-round corner. It seemed like every year Mike Zimmer would draft another first-round corner. And every year Trey Wayans and Mike Hughes, and every year you still stink at corner. And you still, I think, have issues at cornerback. But nonetheless, defensively, I think that's where a lot of the energy for this team needs to be focused. Obviously, you've still got some issues up front, offensive line-wise. You could use another receiver. It wouldn't hurt, but tight end is another position that I think you can attack. But defensively, I think corner is definitely a problem area. Defensive tackle, edge rusher, these are all positions I think would be at the top of the list for the Minnesota Vikings. If you ask me, I think that's where they need to attack first before you start looking at the offensive side of the football. And really the value for the positions that they need offensively are probably a little bit further back in the draft, unless you're trying to acquire a tackle. So you go to the Chicago Bears. This is a team, another one of these teams where I'm still not quite sure what direction they're heading in. Clearly, you got Justin Fields, and you want to build around him, but you go out, you get a defensive-minded head coach. I'm not in favor of pairing a young quarterback with a defensive-minded head coach, but you got to get the guy that you feel like is the right man for the job, and that's what they apparently went out and did with Matt Eberflus. That said, I just hate playing musical chairs with my young quarterback, because if their offensive coordinator turns out to be good, similar to Buffalo, and I'm anxious to see what happens with the Bills this year, because Brian Daboll was the man in Buffalo. Now he's in New York with the Giants. I want to see what the Bills do offensively, because this is why it's a problem when you got a young quarterback with a defensive-minded head coach, because that offensive coordinator, if he's any good and the offense gets rolling, he's going to get a head coaching job. So you always would prefer to have young quarterback with young offensive, minded head coach, because those guys can grow together like Drew Brees and Sean Payton did for many years. That's the kind of pairing you're looking for, but it doesn't have to be that way. That's not a rule of thumb, but it's, to me, easier that way. That said, want to see what the Bears do. Offensively, they just lack a lot of weaponry. They haven't done Justin Fields any favors this offseason. They didn't go out and get any guys. They lost Allen Robinson. Clearly, they were going to lose him. The cupboard is bare at receiver, frankly. I mean, yeah, they've got a few guys. Really, Darnell Mooney is the only guy that scares you offensively. For them. I mean, there's not much out there that you get excited about at receiver. And so they're going to have to really do some work, man. Tight end, they drafted the kid out of Notre Dame a couple of years ago. And I think they've got some stuff at tight end, but the offensive line was a sieve last year. There's just a lot wrong fundamentally with that offense. Defensively, you move on from Khalil Mack. So he was hurt last year anyway. So they probably said to themselves, look, we know what life without Mac looks like. He wasn't even available last year. So let's just move on from him. And I think it was the right thing to do. Get some draft capital, try and put yourself in a position to replace him and maybe fast track, the path, because honestly, defensively is how they're going to be in ball games. This is why they probably went out and got Matt Eberflus as their head coach. Whereas the Vikings, they went out and got Kevin O'Connell is their head coach, because offensively they're closer there than they are defensively. So we'll see what happens. The bottom line is they need a lot. Similar to what I said with Seattle, they need a lot, and I would be interested in seeing what they value the most. You got to help your young quarterback succeed. I hate seeing teams take a young quarterback and then not give him enough around him to help him succeed. Justin Fields is in a tough spot. That is not a talented Bears offense, and I don't think they've done nearly enough. So this draft needs to be heavily slated, towards the offensive side of the football, and really at all levels. Offensive line, they could probably use a backup running back, even though I thought that the kid Khalil Herbert last year actually played really well. I think that was his last name, Herbert. I think it was Herbert out of Virginia Tech. I thought he actually played really well, but you probably could use another one of those running back wise, and you definitely need, you could probably use 2 or 3 wide receivers, to be honest with you. So they're in a tough spot. Defensively, they could use a lot of help there as well. You go to the Detroit Lions, and they're in a similar spot as the Houston Texans and, some of these teams that are rebuilding. They're not really looking, in particular at one position or the other. They're just looking to get good football players because they need players everywhere. So, they hit a home run in the 3rd round with Amon-Ra St. Brown last year. They're looking to do that. It'd be nice if Jeff Okudah finally showed up, and it's been 2 years of absolutely nothing for Jeff Okudah. Last year, season ended with an injury. He was disappointing in his rookie campaign. They need something out of Jeff Okudah this year. If they don't get it out of him, they're probably going to have to move on from him because it's a drain having a 1st-round pick just continue to struggle the way that he has. But I don't want to give up on the young fellow. We'll see what happens there. But they're just looking to stack good draft pick on top of good draft pick. They've got 2 in this draft, number 2 overall, 32. And then after that, you just really need to just try to find value in good football players. And so if you're the Detroit Lions, it's really not a particular position that you're hunting after. Obviously, they're going to attack edge rusher because that's where the greatest value is at number 2. But after that, just take the best player available. In my mock draft, Nakobe Dean somehow was still available. They got a leader defensively there after getting Aiden Hutchinson, number 2 overall. So that's the kind of players that they're looking to hunt after, guys that can come in, be leaders on the field, leaders in the locker rooms, leaders off the field, and really help jumpstart that football team going in the right direction. Because if you look at the Lions season last year, they weren't, that bad like the record indicates. They were in a lot of ball games. I talked about this already. I think they had 8 ball games decided by 4 points or less. The problem was they were 1-6-1 or 1-7-1 in those ball games, something like that. So they just didn't know how to win football games, but they were in a lot of games last season. So it'll be interesting to see what direction they go in, but they're looking to stockpile good football players. That's pretty much where they are in their process. It's just continuing to put good football players on the field, on the roster that gives you a chance to get better. I still think they're going to be looking for the quarterback of the future. Who knows? That 32nd pick could end up being like a Matt Corral or someone like that to groom behind Jared Goff. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the quarterback position because clearly Jared Goff is not the answer, but maybe they don't look to address that in this year's draft. That's something to look and watch for with the Detroit Lions. So now you move on to the NFC South. And this division, until Tom Brady came back, this division was looking like the worst in football. But with Brady back in the saddle, it gives them a clear head and shoulders front runner for that division in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so to me, they've got a couple of needs to address. The first being defensive tackle. No more Ndamukong Suh. Looks like he's going to move on in free agency. And so you need to address that up front defensively. Also, you have an interior offensive lineman retire. You lose another one in Alex Kappa in free agency. And just like that, you got a hole on your offensive line. Now, you did trade for Shaq Mason, so that helps alleviate a little bit of the stress of losing a couple of starters on the offensive line. That said, there's still a hole. Now, you got Anthony Stinney and a bunch of guys that are going to vie for that spot. How about you just draft someone and keep those guys on the bench? We'll see what the Buccaneers decide to do along the offensive line because the number one priority always is and always will be protect Tom Brady. That's number one. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they took an offensive lineman back into the first round just to make sure that there are no holes on that offensive line. That said, the value probably will be its greatest at that pick 27 on the defensive line at defensive tackle. We'll see what exists there on the board. There will be some options potentially available for them. And we'll see what they decide to do. Those are 2 areas that they definitely need to target. They lost a safety in free agency. Mike Edwards moved on in free agency. So they got a young secondary and they can probably withstand that blow. But it wouldn't hurt you to address safety, add another young piece to that secondary. It was good to get Carlton Davis back in free agency, get him back in the mix. So that's a Bucs team. I think you could use another edge rusher. You took Justin Tryon or Joe Tryon Shoyinka last year in the first round. But JPP is not getting any younger. Shaq Barrett, is another guy you paid some good money to, but eventually he'll be gone. It wouldn't hurt to have another guy in that rotation up front. Same with the linebacker position. Levante David can't do it forever. It'd be nice to add another piece there if you're the Buccaneers. Clearly, Gronk isn't back yet. I think he'll be back. But I think, you lose O.J. Howard finally, and, Gronk may not be back. Tight end is another position. If you're the Buccaneers, I think you should be hunting, and you'll get great value in rounds 3 through 5 at the tight end position in particular. So I think that's another position that the Buccaneers should be looking at. And you know what? It wouldn't hurt to maybe look at the receiver position, because I thought last year what really hurt you was not having Antonio Brown. Even with Chris Godwin going out, if Antonio Brown were still there, you probably would have been okay. But knowing that you're one injury away from being just the Mike Evans show, that's problematic for me. So I wouldn't be opposed to adding a receiver. Don't have to do that early. The depth at that position should allow you to do that, 4th, maybe even 5th round, and still feel like you got a quality football player. So we'll see what happens with the Buccaneers. You go to the next team in that division. It's the Atlanta Falcons. And man, I tell you what, well, let's go to the Saints first. I don't want to dismiss the Saints, even though I really don't know what direction they're going in. I can tell you, I like the fact that they kept it in-house this offseason, with the whole coaching situation. Thought that was the right thing to do. So Dennis Allen gets the nod. They upgrade everybody else's title. Carmichael, all those guys stay in-house. So it gives you the continuity of what you had with Sean Payton. You don't have a whole bunch of change going on. Now the question, and I know why they did what they did. I packaged up picks to go get a quarterback. The likelihood is they said, look, if we get 16 and 19, we know we're going to get us a receiver at 16 or 19, and we know we're going to get us a tackle at 16 or 19. We're good. Like, we lost our left tackle, Teron Armstead, in free agency. We don't have another receiver opposite of Michael Thomas. Haven't had one for a very long time, honestly. I mean, Callaway, what he did last year was phenomenal, but you still need another guy. And so I think that's what they're looking to address at 16 and 19. And it really doesn't matter in what order. You get the best value. If the tackle sits there at 16, you take him. 19, there'll be plenty of options at receiver, and they'll take one of those, and then they'll keep it pushing. That's what I think they ultimately do. I still think the Saints are an outside shot to trade up. They're a team that I think is going to be super aggressive in getting what they want. They want a high-level wide receiver, want a high-level tackle, and I think those are two of the biggest items that they'll be looking to grab in this draft. Also, I think they need to do some work up front along that defensive front. Again, you can use more bodies up there, more guys. I don't think they ever truly replaced Sheldon Rankins on that defensive front. So I think you should be looking to maybe address, defensive tackle, and maybe even get another edge rusher in there. Losing Trey Hendrickson was huge. I mean, I thought that was one of the biggest issues with your defense last year, was the inability to get to the quarterback consistently, especially when you don't have a healthy, my man that always is hurt, but he's so good when he's healthy. I can't even think of his damn name right now, but another first-round pick from the Saints. So, Zach Bond hasn't worked out for you as another edge rusher, a guy that you were hoping would give you a little juice off the edge. So I wouldn't be shocked if they look to do something a little bit later on in the draft coming off the edge. But for me, wide receiver, offensive line, specifically tackle, are two of the key positions that you need to be taking a look at. And on the defensive side of the football, I think also linebacker wouldn't hurt to take a look at, because, again, you're getting guys that are getting up there in age. I mean, how much longer can Demario Davis do it at such a high level? So it'd be nice to have, and you lose a safety, you gain a safety, because, you move, Marcus Williams moves on, gets a big payday from Baltimore. You replace him with Marcus May. So you're not really hurting at safety, but I think you could probably use another corner in New Orleans as well. So Saints are in a good spot, though. I think their roster isn't that bad, but they really need to get more playmakers offensively for Jameis Winston. And quarterback clearly is a discussion that needs to be had in New Orleans. I don't know if this is the year that you look to replace anybody or upgrade the position, but I think it is something that is being discussed internally for the New Orleans Saints. So you go to the Atlanta Falcons. They're another team that they're interesting. This is a really interesting draft for them, because this is year 2 of their brain trust. You got the second year of their GM, second year of their head coach, Arthur Smith. And this is I think a big year for them, because you move on from Matt Ryan, which is something that I thought you could have started the process of last year. You drafted Kyle Pitts. I think last year I would have taken the quarterback, not Kyle Pitts. Doesn't matter. Kyle Pitts went over 1,000 yards last year. He's a unique, individual. He's a unicorn at the tight end position. So I'm not mad at the pick, but I made this point last year that you knew this day was coming. The day of reckoning with Matt Ryan was coming, and you needed to be better equipped to deal with it. Maybe you didn't love any of those quarterbacks. Maybe the guys you loved went 1, 2, 3, and you didn't love Fields, you didn't love Mac Jones, and that's fine. That said, now you're in a position where Marcus Mariota is the heir apparent to the throne for now. And a lot of people just assume, oh, Marcus Mariota is going to be a stopgap and they're going to draft a quarterback this year or one next year. Au contraire, my friend. Arthur Smith was there in the infant stages of Marcus Mariota in Tennessee. He probably believes in Marcus Mariota. Similar to Brad Holmes in Detroit, everyone just assumes Brad Holmes, Jared Goff was a throw-in in the deal last year that allowed the Rams to acquire Matthew Stafford. And Brad Holmes was like, no. I was in the room pushing for Jared Goff to be the number 1 overall pick, back in 2016. I believe in this kid. So as long as you got somebody that's your biggest cheerleader in your corner, and that's what Marcus Mariota has in Atlanta, he's going to have a shot. This could literally be his job if he plays well enough this year. That said, I think you have to be looking at quarterback. I don't know if you have to do anything necessarily this year. Similar to New Orleans, there's not a have to do need this year at quarterback, but you should be doing homework on the position in case a guy falls in your lap that you really do covet. That said, they need so much help at various positions. Edge rusher, they were the only team in the league to have less than 20 sacks last season. The Falcons, this has been an ongoing problem for them for years. They haven't had a reliable pass rush probably since going all the way back to I'm being OC because I want to skip over Vic Beasley because that was a fluke year in 2016 when they made it to the Super Bowl and he was fantastic along that season. But really, John Abraham and company, back in like 2012 was probably the last time they had a reliable pass rush. But that said, they need edge rushing help. Okay, they drafted AO last year out of Notre Dame. They need some more guys. They need some more beef up front. Grady Jarrett can't do it by himself on that defensive line. So I don't know what Marlon Davidson is doing, but they spent a second-round pick on him a couple of years ago out of Auburn. I didn't necessarily love that pick. So clearly there needs to be an upgrade on the defensive line, edge rusher in particular for the Atlanta Falcons. I think that wide receiver is the next biggest need. Obviously, Julio Jones gone. Clearly, Calvin Ridley won't be available in 2022. So, and really, when he does come back, is that relationship fractured after sitting out pretty much all of last year and then getting popped for gambling on the NFL? At this point, I look at Calvin Ridley as a guy that they're probably looking to move on from. So, look, there's nothing for Marcus Mariota to get the football to outside of Cordero Patterson at the running back / wide receiver position and Kyle Pitts. They have got to, and when I say got to, they also lost another one of those receivers in free agency. So I think it was the kid from LSU, Gage. I think he's gone as well. So like they really need like 3 receivers straight up. I mean, they need a ton of work offensively. The offensive line, it seems like they went a stretch where they were spending first-round picks on the offensive line like every single year, and yet the offensive line still stinks. I never understand that. They drafted Lindstrom one year. They drafted the kid out of Washington at the tackle position one year. Clearly, they drafted Matthews, and he's been probably the one guy that actually stepped up and played at the level that he was drafted at. But they've drafted so many first-round. Caleb McGarry is the guy out of Washington, and I didn't love that pick. And it's just been mistake after mistake on that offensive line. So they're still in need of offensive line help, are the Falcons. So there's so much wrong fundamentally with what they've got going on offensively. And defensively, they can't get to the quarterback. There's so many issues, but they're going to – all you can do is address them one at a time. So at 8, it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do. Clearly, they're going to have a lot of options. Edge rusher is going to be there for them to take potentially. Wide receiver, they could pop the top on the position. I don't think anyone's taken a receiver before 8. So they could have the chance to take the very first receiver, the guy that they perceive to be the best in this year's draft class at 8, if they so choose. but we'll see what they do. Because if you take you have the choice at 8 if you're the Falcons. You could probably take the third best tackle because maybe the first two are already gone. Maybe there only one tackle has been taken, and you could take the second best tackle in your opinion, or maybe it's the first best. It's the best tackle on your board. The guy that went first, Evan Neal or like Wangwu. Neither one of them were number one. Maybe it was the other way around. Evan Neal was your number one, and Icky went first, or Icky's first on your board, and Neal goes first, and he's still available. Whatever the case may be, that'll be available to you. I don't think any receivers will be gone at 8. So you'll have the choice of the pick of the litter, the number 1 receiver on your draft board, or you'll probably have, the number 4 edge rusher, because I expect by the time you get on the board at 8, 4 or 3 edge rushers will have been taken by then. Thibodeau, Hutchinson, and Walker will all be gone by the time we get to number 8. So the Falcons have an interesting decision. And then whatever you do from there, you start to build upon that, the remainder of the draft. Then you finish up the division with the Carolina Panthers. They're another intriguing team. This is one of the more intriguing divisions in football in terms of the draft, because so many teams in that division need a quarterback. The Saints need a quarterback. The Falcons need a quarterback. And the Panthers need a quarterback. And really, if you're the Buccaneers, you need a quarterback too. You'll push it down the road another year because Brady's back. But look at where you were when Brady decided he was going to retire. You were scrambling. You had no idea what you were going to do this year. So you probably should be sniffing around the quarterback position. If you don't believe in Kyle Trask, then you should be sniffing around these second and third round quarterbacks to see if there's something here that you may be able to unearth. But that said, Carolina is in desperate need of a quarterback. Similar to Carolina or Seattle, you really don't want to start the season with Sam Darnold as your guy. Like, you can. I mean, it's not going to kill you. You're going to stink. But you really don't want to do this. You would prefer to get a young guy in there. And even if that young guy's not ready to go, cool. He'll be ready by week 6, and it'll give your fan base something to look forward to, because Sam Darnold stinks. But we'll see what they decide to do. I can't see a way, and we've heard the Baker Mayfield rumor that they were going to trade for him. Now that's been debunked, and they said, hey, we're not trading for him prior to the draft or during the first round. So what that tells me, I'll say this. If they take a tackle at 6, they're going to trade for Baker Mayfield. I don't see them doing that. I see them spending the 6th overall pick on a quarterback. They want Malik Willis. I think someone's going to trade up in front of them and take Malik Willis. I think the Giants can get out of 5. They're one of the few teams in the top 10 that will be able to trade out of the top 10, because 6 is a hot spot, or 5 is a hot spot, because 6 is a guaranteed quarterback position for me. I've said this all along. I've said the Carolina Panthers were putting up a smoke screen. You know how it is draft time. It's lion season. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. You knew what they were up to. They were out here lying to everybody, saying, hey, we about to trade for Baker Mayfield. We won't need no quarterback, so that there wouldn't be as much heat coming off of that 5th pick. There wouldn't be as much steam coming off that pick. However, that theory has been debunked. Everybody knows. We can see through your bullshit. And we know you're drafting a quarterback at 6. And they've already come out and said, hey, we good. Like, you don't even need to get in front of us, because we good with either one of the 2 quarterbacks in Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis. I believe them. I think they're good with either one, but they prefer one over the other. They prefer Malik Willis. But they're good with Kenny Pickett because, remember, once upon a time, their head coach recruited Kenny Pickett to Temple, okay? So Matt Rule knows Kenny Pickett, knows his game, loves Kenny Pickett's game, and I don't think he would have a problem with Kenny Pickett being his quarterback. That said, they want a rock star in Carolina, and they think Malik Willis has a chance to be that. So they're trying to throw everybody off the scent of the trail. No one's falling for it, and if the Giants are smart, they should be shopping that pick for a team that is thirsty enough to come up to get Malik Willis. If no one's interested, which that's a hard sell, man. I mean, damn, you trying to trade up into the top 5 to get Malik Willis? Really? That's a hard sell, but somebody may be desperate enough. All it takes is one. We'll see. But the Panthers clearly are going to draft a quarterback, if you ask me. Not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. They're taking a quarterback at 6. Then after that, to me, then you need to turn your attention to various areas of the football team. I like that you got a running back last year in Chuba Hubbard. Because Christian McCaffrey is becoming less and less dependable as the years wear on. So that's, something that you need to continue to focus on. I think you're okay at receiver. You drafted Terrence Marshall. Didn't really give you much last year, but the quarterback position was so bad that it's hard to really evaluate some of these skill position guys like Trimble, who you got last year in the draft out of Notre Dame as well. So I think on the offensive side, you're fine. Offensive line-wise, I think that you could use a little bit of work there. Clearly, if you don't go quarterback, then offensive line would be the next pressing need that you would address. So I think I could see them really trying to attack the offensive line after drafting a quarterback. You draft the quarterback, now draft the guy to protect the quarterback. And then after you do that, you start turning your attention to the defense. I think they've got some dogs on that defense. I think they just need one or two more pieces to really put them over the top defensive wise. I think they could use another edge rusher opposite of Brian Burns. Yetur Gross-Matos still hasn't really moved the needle for me because you could add more depth there. Defensive tackle, you could always add more depth inside there as well. Linebacker, I think you're okay, but you did lose the ex-Maryland linebacker. I can't. Wow, his name was right on the tip of my tongue. He went to Kansas City, so you did lose some depth at linebacker and a guy that was a quality player for you. So linebacker wouldn't be something that I would shy away from. But to me, a lot of the work needs to be done offensively first if you're Carolina. Also secondary wise, cornerback wise. Yeah, you had J.C. Horn. That's great. You could use another corner. That's why you had Stephon Gilmore. That's why you traded for C.J. Henderson. I don't know if any of that stuff is working out for you, but another corner would definitely help in Carolina. So I think I got a couple more super chats. I'll take those, and then we'll go to the final team in the NFC, or final conference or division, excuse me, in the NFC, and that is the NFC East before we make our way over to the AFC conference. Let's see where we left off at. We left off here. So the next super chat is from Johnny Boy 26. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Johnny Boy 26 writes, would love Jaquan Brisker at 47. The guy has it all. I wasn't necessarily sold at first. I thought he lacked the physicality that I was looking for at that particular position. You know, Ron's looking for a Buffalo nickel. Ron has stressed that, look, it doesn't have to be a safety. You know, it just happened to be a safety last year with Landon Collins. But in the past, it's been a linebacker playing that position, which is why I'm a big JoJo Domann fan, because he fits the Buffalo nickel position to a T. Like when you think Buffalo nickel, you think of a guy like JoJo Domann, an ex-safety now playing linebacker, right around 230 pounds that can run, and coverage ability is there as well. So to me, that's where the value is. Problem is, you got to hope JoJo Domann is still available in the fourth round. If I'm Washington, that's when I start to really take a look at filling that void. But Jaquan Brisker at 47 makes a ton of sense. We need depth at safety. I mean, to be honest with you, we can just use another body there. You're not looking to draft another body at 47. You're looking to draft an impact player. And when I went back and watched 2020 Jaquan Brisker, I was more impressed because that's the physical nature that I was looking for. He got injured. I watched that game against Wisconsin, first game of the season for Penn State. He got banged up. It was never really right shoulder-wise. And so he wasn't as physical, and I wasn't feeling him. So going back to watch 2020 kind of helped me reshape my evaluation of him. And I do think he's a guy that can do a lot of things on the football field that you like. So I wouldn't be opposed to Jaquan Brisker at 47 either. Zachary Portnoy, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy. Zachary writes, Patriots trade up to 3 to pick the next lock cornerback. Sauce. That's always been a staple of Bill Belichick. I've said this. I think I've said this for the last decade. When Bill Belichick is at his best defensively, when the team is at its best defensively, they've got a lockdown corner. And you can go through the years, you can go through the archives, and it started with Ty Law, and then it worked its way up to Asante Samuel. Then it was Darrelle Revis. Then it was Stephon Gilmore, and then it was J.C. Jackson. They've always had a corner. Always, always, always. Aqib Talib, I left him out somewhere. I think he's in there somewhere between Revis and Stephon Gilmore. I think it's Aqib Talib in there. They've always had that guy. They cannot exist defensively without that position being taken care of. So they clearly could go after a cornerback. I don't know if I see them trading all the way up to number 3, however. And again, It makes sense though, because you've got an ex-Patriots executive working in the front office of the Texans, doing business with his old chums. It would make a ton of sense, but I don't see the Texans trading out again. Much like Detroit, if I'm Houston, I think I'm trying to get as many good football players as possible. I earned the number 3 pick in the draft. I need to get my return on investment. I stunk enough to earn the 3rd pick. I need to get a player worthy of that selection. I can't trade out with the Patriots, who made the playoffs. You're asking me to trade all the way back into the 20s. Yeah, you're going to get a hell of a haul for that, but at what cost? So that'd be an interesting dynamic. If they did do it, you knew what they would be coming up for, right? Cornerback for sure. All right. John Livingston. I'll take this one, and then we'll go back to the last division in the NFC. And then I see another super chat. We'll come back to that one a little bit later on. John Livingston, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy JL Smooth writes, Crowder is on my Bills. I thought so. I knew he stayed in the division. I thought he was on the Bills to replace Cole Beasley, but I wasn't sure. I knew it was one of those teams. I was like, I think it's Buffalo. It says, showing my age here, but Williams reminds me so much of McGee when the Bills took him in the first round. I'm a U fan. Jim Kelly had that swag, man. Williams would be a steal, in my opinion. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens. There are going to be some guys that drop in this draft that will give you an opportunity, and maybe there's one. I mean, clearly, and I'm assuming you're talking about the Alabama receiver Williams. That's my assumption. I could be wrong, and you could be talking about, because Williams is a very common last name, but I'm assuming you're talking about the receiver. So I don't think he's going to fall. Like, the more and more you hear about him, and then we saw the video, I think that's the thing that really starts to push him up draft boards, is the fact that we saw video evidence of him, pushing a sled and running, and because of that, you assume that he might be back sooner rather than later. And so I don't think he's going to fall. I initially, in my mock draft, I had the Packers getting him at 22, Jameson Williams. I don't think he's going to fall that far. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets took him at 10. Personally, I said this before, and I'll say it again. Had he been healthy, he would be the number 1 receiver in this draft class. So the fact that he's getting back to being healthy, we'll see. See what happens. But he will definitely be a steal for sure, if he got to you. Anyway, let's finish up the NFC, and then we will get to this last comment, and then we'll go to the AFC. So the NFC East, Dallas Cowboys, it was an exodus this offseason. They lost a ton of players. They lost Amari Cooper via trade. They moved on from him. A lot of people disagree with the move, including Cowboys fans. But we'll see what happens there. They also lost Cedric Wilson at the receiver position. He's now in Miami. They also lost Connor Williams. I don't think they care. He stinks to me. So, but he was a starter for them along the offensive line. They also lost another starter on the offensive line, La'el Collins. They also lost edge rusher Randy Gregory. I mean, it was a mass exodus for the Dallas Cowboys. And so now you look at that roster, and you got to start putting the pieces of the puzzle back together. If you're Dallas, they got James Washington in free agency. So I don't know if they have to be as aggressive at wide receiver. I think ultimately they will, take a receiver at some point, but it's not something they're going to look to do. I think they're going to go back to try to refortify what has been the strength of that team for the last, half a decade, which is their offensive line. So I think they look to attack offensive guard in particular at 24, and then they go from there. I think when you look at some of the positions that they have that need to be filled, edge rusher clearly is a problem for them that needs to be addressed. I think they could also use another corner. I think they could also use another safety. So, I mean, there's a lot that the Cowboys could definitely use. on their football team, So in recapping it, they need another receiver. They need another offensive line, maybe even two offensive linemen to, lessen the impact of losing Williams and Lyle Collins. You could use another corner. I think that's a position that is starting to get thin in Dallas. They drafted a couple of guys last year, including one that just got wrapped up in a murder investigation from Kentucky last year. So, but they drafted him. They drafted the raw kid that was like 6'4" last year as well. Nyshawn Wright, or I think it's Nyshawn something. I think it's Nyshawn something. I can't remember his last name, but they drafted some corners last year. So maybe they're not as desperate at corner, but safety is another position that they still could use an upgrade at. And linebacker too. You moved on from Jalen Smith, and you drafted the defensive rookie of the year, Micah Parsons, but he's going to be all over the field. Edge rusher, linebacker. You probably could use another linebacker out there. Leighton Vander Esch came back, I think, on a 1-year deal. So I think you could also use another linebacker. But we'll see what the Cowboys decide to do. There's plenty of them plenty of things for them to be looking to acquire on the shopping list as they had a rough go of it this offseason. So you go to the next team in that division. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. To me, the Eagles have positioned themselves really well to improve their football team this year, but also keep the door open in the event that Jalen Hurts isn't the answer, because I don't think he ultimately is at the quarterback position. They've positioned themselves to have multiple first-round picks next year so that if they need to get up to 1 or 2 to get a C.J. Stroud or a Bryce Young or even an Anthony Richardson, if he were to ascend next year for the Florida Gators, they'll have the draft capital to be able to acquire one of those selections to get up there to get a guy. So I think they're in a really good spot. When you look at their roster, clearly they are driven by their offensive line and their defensive line. So their defensive line, to me, is starting to get to a place where it needs to be revamped. They need some edge rushing help. They need some defensive tackle help. I think that you got Fletcher Cox, who is no longer at the level that he was once at, and he's on a 1-year deal. You have Javon Hargrave on a 1-year deal, or on the last year of his deal, excuse me. And so you're going to have 2 guys that are free agents next year as defensive tackles. I think you need to draft a defensive tackle. I think the secondary is the biggest problem defensively for Philadelphia. They don't have any corners. They moved on from one of their corners in free agency. They were already lacking at the position before losing Steven Nelson. So they've got, Darius Slay. They got nothing opposite of him. So something has to be done there. I think they're lacking in real true oomph at safety as well. So I think the back end is a problem for the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw it last year. They were exposed at times on the back end of that defense. Linebacker was a problem for them. They got Kaiser White in free agency, so that's going to help them there. But I wouldn't necessarily just stop at Kaiser White. If you get an opportunity to take a linebacker maybe a little bit further down in the draft, do that. And clearly, wide receiver, you cannot afford to take another receiver in the first round if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. You've done it 2 years in a row. Devontae Smith last year, and the year before that, Jalen Reagor. I think you should take a receiver early in this draft. I don't think it needs to be with one of your 2 first-round picks, however. I think you can be aggressive in the second round, and even if you need to package up some picks to move up and get a guy in particular, so be it. But to me, I don't think you need to be spending another first-round pick on a wide receiver. I would attack the cornerback position and maybe even defensive line with those 2 picks, offensive line if need be. I mean, look, it's debatable because you get Jason Kelce back, but for how long? He was mulling over retirement. Could he retire next year? Sure. But do you want to draft a guy in the first round that may not have to play at all this year? I don't see that. Jordan Mailata looks like he's locking up the left tackle position. You still have a really good right tackle already. So I don't know if you need to address offensive line early. Maybe you spend draft capital on the offensive line, specifically center, maybe later in the draft. But to me, corner, safety, wide receiver, defensive tackle, edge rusher, these are all positions of need for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I wouldn't even rule out tight end, even though I like some of the developmental guys that they have and specifically Tyree Jackson, who I thought was doing some good things in the preseason before getting injured. I don't know if I would invest in a tight end if I'm Philadelphia or not, but that's something else to explore if you're the Eagles as well. Then you go to the Washington Commanders, and this is a team that only has 6 draft picks. So they're in quite the quandary. They're the opposite of the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs and some of these teams with double-digit amount of picks who just have abundance of riches to do whatever they so please in the draft, maneuver the board however they so choose. Washington has to be very strategic in how they maneuver, because I don't think they want to leave this draft with just 6 players. And their GM, Martin Mayhew, has already mentioned, I can't see us ending this draft with 6 dudes. So that tells me that at some point they're going to move back to acquire more capital. They've already stated that the core of this draft resides in rounds 2 through 5. That's where they want more capital. Right now, they don't have a 3rd or a 5th round pick. So right now they're hurting in what they perceive to be the best value of the draft. So I think either the 1st round pick is one that they look to trade out of. I don't think they're going to be able to get out of 11, but the 2nd round pick at 47 may be intriguing because there may be a lot of good football players still available at 47 that teams behind them would love to come up and get their hands on. That may be the pick they ultimately may be able to trade back out of, move back maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 picks, and then pick up a 3rd and a 5th in doing that, or pick up a 5th and a 4th in doing that. But we'll see what happens with Washington. They could even trade Daron Payne, a guy that we're hearing rumors now that they're not looking to extend potentially. And if you're not going to get anything for him, if you're not going to extend him, if you're not going to keep him, you don't just want the 3rd round compensatory pick. There will be teams interested in Daron Payne. He's got 2 years left. And if Washington isn't going to pick up the 5th year option on him, then that's something that they have to decide. Hold on. They've already picked up the 5th year option. So they're in a position where there could be another team out there that wants Daron Payne and upon trading for him would sign him to a long-term deal. And he'll be interesting around league circles. I don't know if anything gets done there. I don't see Washington trading Daron Payne, but that's another option for them to pick up more draft capital. That said, Washington clearly is in the market for another receiver. I think they're in the market for a running back, even though they have a guy. I think they're in the market for another tight end. They don't have a TE2 right now. I think they're in the market for another offensive lineman after moving on from both starting guards a season ago. You've filled one of those guard voids already with Andrew Norwell signing, but you haven't filled the other void. Now you've got guys that you have confidence in on your roster already, but similar to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you got guys that you can plug in there, but why when you can go get another guy? But when you only have 6 picks, you have to pick and choose what you can take care of. There is 0 depth. This is why I don't think you trade Daron Payne. You have 0 depth at defensive tackle right now. So that's another position that I think you have to be aggressive in pursuing. Clearly, Ron Rivera wants another Buffalo nickel, meaning either a safety or a linebacker that can play that nickel role. So that's another position that they're going to be taking a look at. There are a lot of holes, as you can tell, on this roster. Carson Wentz is a guy that they want to surround with talent. So receiver is definitely something they're going to look to address in this draft at some point. So you're talking receiver, you're talking running back, you're talking edge. You could use an edge rusher. I don't think that's something that should be on your list right now with all the other pressing needs. Defensive tackle is huge. Linebacker, safety. You could use a nickel corner if you're Washington. You currently don't have a kick or punt returner on your roster as we sit here on April the 27th. So there are so many pressing issues for this team. How do you address them in just 6 picks? I don't think you can, which is why I think they'll ultimately move back at some point, acquire more draft capital, and then try to attack this draft aggressively. And also, if I haven't mentioned it before, let me mention it again. Tight end is something else that they'll need to go after. So then you get to the New York Giants, and much like the Minnesota Vikings, they needed to hit the reset button. No more Dave Gettleman at GM. He retired. No more Joe Judge head coach. They moved on from him, and in comes a bunch of Buffalo Bills to save the day. They get Joe Schoen as their new GM, and they get Brian Daboll as their new head coach. And so now we see what the vision is in New York. And I think it starts with the offensive line. Clearly, I don't think they believe in Daniel Jones. They've got a decision to make to pick up his option, which is $22 million. I don't think they have any intentions of picking that up, which means he's in a prove-it year, essentially. That said, he can't prove a damn thing if he can't be protected. So they're going to be aggressive. Right now, the Giants have multiple first-round picks, 2 inside the top 10 as we sit here right now. They could be wheeling and dealing on draft day. I've talked about 5 potentially being a hot spot to get in front of the Panthers if you're looking for a quarterback. So that'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. If they take a player, I think it'll be a tackle. They also need a corner because word on the street is that they're going to trade James Bradberry. And if they can't trade him, they'll have to release him. But he will not be on the roster this year. So if you ask me, James Bradberry, his vacancy, because to me, he was the best corner in the NFC East. That's a huge void you're leaving in that Giants defense and secondary. You got to address that. So I think they're going to take a Derek Stingley Jr., if you want to be honest, with that second first round pick in the top 10 at 7 overall. I think that's where they go. But who's to say what they decide to do? Clearly, corner is going to be a problem after you move on from James Bradberry. Offensive line is a mess. You could use 2 or 3 offensive linemen, and I think they will draft at bare minimum 2, probably more like 3 of those guys. I think when you look at the receiver position, Kadarius Toney is a guy that they're anxious to get their hands on, but he doesn't seem to be reciprocating that energy. So there's a really disconnect there. But you got Kenny Golladay. You got a plethora of receivers there. They shouldn't have to worry about receiver right now. Tight end, to me, is a problem for them. They did address a little bit of it in free agency by getting Ricky Seals-Jones, but I would still look to add another tight end if I were the New York Giants. Running back is something that you added Brightwell last year. He's not a 3-down back. Saquon Barkley, he still thinks he can be that guy that he was after his first 2 years. We haven't seen that guy in 2 years. So that might be a position that you look to maybe be aggressive with if you think Barkley is a guy on the outs. We'll see what they decide to do there. On the defensive side of the football, you still need another edge rusher. You know, I thought Azeez Ojulari actually played well for you last year, but still need another edge rusher. I think linebacker is something you should take a look at. You moved on from a couple of those guys in free agency. So I think that's another position that you should be taking a look at. And then, as I mentioned, cornerback is going to be a problem. You also lost I thought your leader defensively in Jabril Peppers. He's gone now. So to me, safety is another position that you need to take a look at. The Giants need a lot of stuff, period, end of discussion. And they're going to be aggressive, I think, in trying to acquire as many talented football players. When you get a new GM, he's looking to put his thumbprint on the roster. So I could see this thing turning over, then, getting a lot of these new guys in here, a lot of them making the team, a lot of these guys that were here previously not making the team when it's all said and done. So we will see what happens with the Giants, but they will be extremely aggressive in this draft in terms of trying to add as many quality, capable bodies to that roster as they can in this draft. So that's the NFC. Now, Vincent Cole has a super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy, Vincent Cole. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, Kayvon slides to Seahawks, crossing fingers. Highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. There's been enough stuff out there put out about him. That's what we get, draft smear campaigns. One is currently being put on Devontae Wyatt. So you get those, when teams want a guy, they put out a lot of, frivolous information. You can do your own homework. The lazy people decide not to. They just pick up the low-hanging fruit of what someone else is putting out there, and it's easy to fall into that trap. But these teams, they have enough resources to do the work themselves. So Kayvon Thibodeau is a guy that I don't love. I don't love him. I don't love his game, but he's talented. There is no doubt about that. And clearly the Seahawks need edge rushing help. As I mentioned, they need everything. But, right now, I think you went out and you got the edge rusher from the Chargers, Uchenna Nwosu. That's it. Like, you don't have – I actually thought that the kid from Tennessee, Daryl Taylor, played his ass off last year. But you still need help coming off the edge. So it would be great if he fell to you, but he's not. I don't think he's going to fall to you. I can't see him getting past the Giants twice. Worst case scenario at 7, the Giants are like, okay, this is enough of this. Let's grab this kid. So I can't see him falling to the Seahawks. And hell, if he fell past the Giants at 7, the Falcons are sitting there like, oh my God, this is ridiculous value at 8. I just don't see too many teams that could use an edge rusher. And trust me, in this league, everybody can use an edge rusher. So if you've got a guy with the talent that a Kayvon Thibodeau has, I can't see 8 teams passing him up, or 6, because the Jets and the Giants both have 2 picks. So I can't see 6 teams in the top 8 picks passing on this kid, including the Jets and the Giants passing on him twice. Well, the Jets wouldn't have to pass on him twice because you're before their second pick, but the Giants would have to pass on him twice. I don't see it happening. But you can cross your fingers. And I told you, I'm not a dream killer. I say that after I just killed your dream, but who's keeping score, right? Anyway, I digress. Got no more super chats, I don't think. I told a story. Here's one right here from John Perez. Thank you for the super chat, JP. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, John Perez, writes, on this day in 2018, we got Deron Mother effing Payne. That was a hit on Twitter, by the way. You created a mini LouieTeeNetwork firestorm by reposting that some 4 years ago this day. I had probably the most epic rant I've ever had on my channel. I'm ashamed of it looking back because I'm not an F-bomb guy. You guys know that. I don't drop F-bombs. I've probably dropped the F word 7 to 10 times in my entire life. And I find it very hard to believe that situation made me that mad that I would use up one of the 7 to 10 that I've used in my life on that stream. But I did it. And so people got a kick out of that. But I did say this in that same breath. I said, was anything that I said then wrong? It's crazy going back and watching. I was really high on Josh Rosen. I don't remember being that high on Josh Rosen, but I also do remember being very high on Josh Allen. And I said, I remember this like it was yesterday. I said, if I had to put money on one of these, I said, look, all of these quarterbacks that are being taken, remember 2018 had 5 quarterbacks, just like last year had 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And I said, look, of these 5 quarterbacks, only 2 of them are going to be good. That's generally the hit rate. So just like last year, when there were 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round, only 2 of them are probably going to be slam dunks. The rest of those guys are either going to be middling quarterbacks or they're going to stink and be backups for the remainder of their careers. We're seeing that in 2018 already. Jackson and Allen have emerged. Mayfield is starting to having a downturn. He's not, I'm not quitting on him yet, but he right now is in limbo. And obviously Rosen and Darnold stink. So everything that I said in that video was spot on. I said only 2 of these guys are going to make it out of the abyss of this quarterback draft class. I said I will put my money on Allen being one of them. I was right. But I didn't realize I was that high on Josh Rosen. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for bringing that back up, JP. It was a classic rant. And I think it was a lot of truth in that rant. And when you watch it and you hear what I said, including that Ryan Anderson was going to be a bum, he's not even in the league anymore. So you could see what was going on there. But anyway, I digress. Thank you for that super chat, JP. Anyway, let's get to the AFC now. And we'll start with the team that represented the AFC in the Super Bowl in their division. Of course, I'm talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and the AFC North division. So the Bengals are in a very unique position. They're a really talented team. They don't have a bunch of holes. But with that said, the offensive line was a problem. Joe Burrow was sacked over 50 times last year. Remember the playoff game against Tennessee? The man was sacked like 8 times in that game. People forget that. They still won the game. And so it's easy to forget how many times he was molested in that game. I think the following week against Kansas City, he was molested another 5 or 6 times. So they had an issue up front. They went out, were super aggressive in free agency along the offensive line. They got La'el Collins. They got Alex Kappa from the Bucks. So they went out and got Ted Karras from the Patriots, and they still could use another offensive lineman. That's how bad it was up front for them. So, I could see them at 31 taking what's available. They could use cornerback. I do not believe Eli Apple is a guy that you want to be relying on at the cornerback position. Love what Chidobe Awuzie gave you. Do not want to rely on Eli Apple to follow up what he did for you a season ago with an encore. I just don't see him doing that. So I think corner is another one of those positions they should be aggressive at. But outside of that, to be honest with you, corner, offensive line, there's not a lot of. They lost tight end, the kid from Auburn. They lost him to the Jets. So tight end is another position. They drafted Drew Sample a couple of years ago. I wasn't the biggest Drew Sample fan out of Washington, but they still got stuff at tight end. But CJ Uzama was huge for that offense. They definitely need some tight end. And boy, they're going to have the pick of the litter in the mid-round. So Cincinnati, I've always said this about the Bengals. They draft really well. They're one of the best drafting teams along with Jacksonville, Dallas, and several other teams that really get the draft. They're one of those teams that get it, which is why Cincinnati's always chock full of talent. Now they've added the piece that they had been missing, which was being an active player in free agency. They did that last year. They did it the year before. It wasn't as successful. Last year was them hitting the gold mine in free agency with Trey Hendrickson, Chidobe Awuzie, Mike Hilton, Larry Ogunjobi. Like, these were all big contributors defensively that helped reshape the way that defense looked. So if you ask me, they're going to be just fine. They don't have a ton of gaping holes on that football team, and they've got so much young talent. It's not even funny. So tight end, offensive line, corner are all positions that if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals that I'm looking to invest in. I may be leaving out one or two positions that they could use some more help at, but it's not much. They're really talented. It's a good team, and they're well-rounded as well. Then you get to the next team in that division, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people forget they made the playoffs. It was in and out. It was a quick, foray into the playoffs. Before you were able to blink, they were gone and got bounced. But, they no longer have Ben Roethlisberger. And I look at that football team, and I think that they have to address the quarterback position. They realize it. And just like the one thing about the Steelers, they don't do a great job of, sleight of hand when it comes to the draft. They tell you exactly what they're going to do, and then they go out and do it. It's sort of like their football team. Like, they don't really try to trick you. You know what you're getting with the Steelers, and if they can't run it, they're going to throw it 50 times with Ben Roethlisberger, and they're going to try to beat you that way. If they can run it, they're going to try to run it down your throat and play good defense and beat you that way. But they don't really try sleight of hand, and they don't do it in the draft. They tell you what they're going to do. We knew they were getting Najee Harris last year. Like, it wasn't that hard, right? They're going to get a quarterback this year. It's not hard. The question then becomes, how many are already off the board before they selected 20? That's the real question, because that can alter what they decide to do at 20, because you don't want to just take a quarterback for the sake of taking a quarterback. If you're the Steelers, you want to get value in making that selection. Do they trade up? I really feel like their GM, Kevin Colbert, who is on his way out, wants to give them the Ozzie Newsome treatment on his way out of the door. Ozzie Newsome left the Ravens the best gift he could possibly leave them, which was a franchise quarterback in Lamar Jackson, and they're forever indebted to him for that. I think Kevin Colbert wants to leave a legacy on the way out. Hey, I left you. I got you Ben Roethlisberger, got you a couple of Super Bowls in the during that course of his career, and now I want to leave you this parting gift on my way out as a thank you for the years that you allowed me to serve this organization. So I think that he may be aggressive. We've seen the Steelers from 20 trade up to 10. They did it before when they took Devin Bush. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they maybe get aggressive and come up to get one of these quarterbacks. I just don't see it happening, right? So they better be careful, because in my mock draft, I had the Titans trading up in front of them to take the third quarterback off the board. And they just better be careful and not, be too lackadaisical when it comes to the quarterback position. They've done their homework, and I got to imagine that they've got a list of about 4 dudes that they're interested in, and one of those 4 should be there at 20. But that said, quarterback is clearly the biggest need this offseason. The tragic death of Dwayne Haskins, coupled with the uncertainty of the position, has put them in quite the bind. Mitchell Trubisky gives you a stabilizing force as a guy that can be a bridge quarterback, but he's not the long-term answer. Nobody thinks that way. He could be, right? But the likelihood is he's not. So they got to do something at quarterback. After that, I think you have to really start to look at the receiver position. I know that you got Deontay Johnson. He's so inconsistent dropping the football. Chase Claypool is cool, but there's not enough substance at that position for me. Now losing James Washington and Juju Smith-Schuster in the same offseason, I think it's time for them to attack the wide receiver position yet again. Offensive line-wise, I think they could, they did some work on the offensive line last year. It wasn't all great returns and results, but that's a young group. I would add another offensive lineman to that mix if I were them. Clearly, we talked about the quarterback position defensively. You're getting to that point now where you got to start adding some more beef up front along that defensive line. I think that's something else that they may look to do in this year's draft. Edge rusher, Highsmith was fine, but you felt the need to go and get Ingram during the season. And that didn't work out for you, but you felt the need to go get him. So that tells me that you feel like you still need more off the edge opposite of TJ Watt. So that's something I'm still keeping an eye on. Corner is definitely, you got Levi Wallace in free agency. That's cool, but Levi Wallace isn't a needle mover. I don't think Joe Hayden's going to be back. I think you need to explore options at corner as well if you're the Steelers. And linebacker has always been something that has been really good to the Steelers. I think that's something else you should be keeping an eye on too if you're the Steelers as well. So a lot there for the Steelers, but nothing trumps quarterback. Haven't had to worry about this for the better part of a decade and a half. Now you do. That's the first thing you have to take control over if you're the Steelers in this draft. You get to the next team in the division. It's the Baltimore Ravens, and this is a team. I think this is an interesting offseason for the Ravens because here's Lamar Jackson without a new contract going into what is the final year of his rookie deal, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So final year of his deal. So you don't really want to be here, right? With a franchise quarterback. You don't want to be where he's got you by the scrotum, but that's where we are. Lamar Jackson is essentially in Kirk Cousins territory. That's a dangerous place to be if you're the Ravens. That said, it feels like we talk about getting Lamar weapons every year, and yet they still find themselves without enough weapons every year. I don't know how that happens, but they still don't have enough at receiver. And I get it. Some of these guys just didn't pan out. Miles Boykin didn't pan out the way you hoped. Clearly, Hollywood Brown has been inconsistent at best. He hasn't been what you thought he was going to be. You thought he was going to be like Tyreek Hill light. That hasn't been the case. So you keep finding yourself. Rashad Bateman, you spent the first round pick on the position last year. You're hoping that he turns out to be legitimate for you. Something has to give because you want to surround him with as many weapons. Clearly, you got one of the best tight ends in all of football in Mark Andrews. You could probably use another tight end. Offensive line wise, you could probably use one or two of those as well. You get to the running back position, and you had so many injuries last year. It's not even funny. But J.K. Dobbins should be back. I've been really disappointed in Justice Hill. I thought he was going to be a great change of pace for you. You still got Gus Edwards. I really don't know if running back is something you really need to be all that worried about, but you never know. They could easily throw a pick at running back later on in the draft. Defensively, I think is where a lot of the resources need to be spent. Clearly, edge rusher, I think is the first need on the board for the Ravens. You went out in free agency, thought you had Zadarius Smith. He stood you up at the altar. So now you have to refocus yourself and find an edge rusher. That to me has always been, since Terrell Suggs in his prime, and paired up with Elvis Dumervil, you haven't really had a legitimate pass rush in Baltimore, I feel like, for like a decade. It's been a long time since you've been able to get after the quarterback consistently. You've had guys like Matt Judon and other guys that have been okay, but and Zadarius Smith before he was a free agent the first time. But I love what Adafi Owe gave you last year, but you still need more on that defensive line and coming off the edge. You were hoping that Ferguson would give you something. He's giving you really nothing. So I think edge rusher is the biggest need. Corner is something that I think you have to take a look at. Just the depth at the position. Clearly, you were banged up last year. That's an understatement in the secondary, but I think you could use another body in the secondary. You went out, spent tons of money on Marcus Williams as a free agent safety acquisition, so don't see you doing much at the safety position, but you could add another body. You did lose another one of those veteran safeties in free agency, so we'll see what happens there for the Ravens. And just, I think the front seven overall could use just more, draft capital being spent on it. So, the Ravens, this is an interesting offseason because we're not used to the Ravens missing the postseason, but Lamar Jackson's contract and, some of the weapons around him or lack thereof. The defense was terrible last year under Wink Martindale. Too many risks, too many injuries. So you're just looking to get the Ravens back to being the Baltimore Ravens. I think this draft is going to go a long way towards doing exactly that. So you get to the final team in that division. It's the Browns. And oh, what a difference a year makes. I mean, the Browns were riding high a year ago this time. They had won a playoff game, almost upset the Chiefs in Arrowhead and made it to the AFC Championship game. You had this two-headed rushing attack monster with Chubb and Hunt. You had one of the best offensive lines in all of football. Mayfield was playing at a very high level. You just felt like, okay, a couple tweaks here and there. Defensively, we need to get better and get a running mate for Myles Garrett and, maybe upgrade the secondary a little bit and we'll be fine. And so that's what they did. And Mayfield gets injured, takes a massive step backwards. The receiver position, trading away Odell Beckham Jr. or releasing him, I should say, and really not having an answer there really set you back to the injuries were a big part of the problem, but you just didn't have enough. I just felt like there weren't enough talented players. And, Jarvis Landry is gone now at the receiver position, out with Landry, in with Amari Cooper. Also, you went out and got Jakeem Grant. That's going to help in the speed department to go along with Anthony Schwartz, who's also a burner. But I like Donovan Peoples-Jones. You still need a number 2. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a number 3. So I think receiver is something that if I'm the Browns, I'm looking to address. Not in the first round. You don't have a first-round pick, but I wouldn't have been addressing that in the first round anyway. Your first pick is at 44 if you're the Browns. I wouldn't be opposed to trading back into. I have you trading back into the first round because I think you need help desperately for Myles Garrett. You had Jadeveon Clowney last year. He came on like gangbusters towards the end of the season. That's not a guy I would bring back. If I were you, leave Jadeveon Clowney alone. He's fool's gold. He's like the most forbidden fruit, and the temptation is there to bring him back, and then he'll miss 9 games next year and get you 2 sacks and be a non-factor. Leave him where he is. Draft a guy like Devontae Wyatt or someone like that if you're the Browns, and that's what you'd have to come up into the first round to do that. And so for me, if I'm the Cleveland Browns, I think getting help for Myles Garrett up front is imperative this offseason. And I wouldn't spare any expense. I'd double down and get 2 guys, one on the interior, one as an edge rusher. Like, you have to do something to help him. He is a one-man wrecking crew up front, but he cannot do it by himself. So I think that's something you have to address. I feel like you have to address the wide receiver position. Clearly, you got Deshaun Watson now. That was the biggest upgrade of the offseason, but you got to get him some weapons, and I think Amari Cooper helps. That's a great place to start. Jakeem Grant, great. I think you got to add another receiver. And I know tight end is good for them. David Njoku at one point was satisfied. Then he wants out. I don't really know what's going on there. But you got tight ends for days, it feels like. But you moved on from Austin Hooper. So I don't know. Maybe tight end something that you throw a pick at some point. But to me, offense, after getting Deshaun Watson, offense shouldn't be your problem. defense is probably going to be where games are won and lost with this football team. And if you can't get Myles Garrett some more help, and you just locked up Denzel Ward, made him the highest paid corner in the league, guaranteed money wise. You drafted Greg Newsome last year in the first round, so your secondary shouldn't be an issue. I think you have to get some help up front for Myles Garrett, and you have to, I think, add to the wide receiver position in particular. So let's see. That's the AFC North. Let's now proceed to the AFC West, where we think it's, I can't say clearly, but it's hard to argue that that's not the best division in football. I mean, there's not a weak link at the quarterback position in that division now, with Russell Wilson coming on board with the Denver Broncos. And it's an arms race out there. It just seems like one move after another for each team trying to get a leg up on the next team in the division. It's going to be hard. They're going to beat the hell out of each other. And whomever comes out on top of that division is probably going to be stronger because of it, because of what you'll have to go through in that division. But we'll start with the division champs yet again. It was the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, the City Chiefs. And they've got 12 picks. So their GM, Brett Veach, is going to be extremely aggressive. I think they're going to trade up in the first round. I think they want to get their hands on a guy like Jameson Williams. He makes a ton of sense for them. You got the draft capital to be able to move up and get him. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the Chiefs, maneuver around the first round draft board to get whatever piece they feel like is necessary. That said, if they were to stand pat, they've got back-to-back selections at 29 and 30 in the first round. And for me, everyone keeps talking about receiver. Well, they've done enough to where if they didn't take a receiver in the first round, I wouldn't be upset, because they signed MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They signed Juju Smith-Schuster to a one-year deal. So those give you, and then they still have guys there. And then they drafted a young guy last year. They still have Mecole Hartman. Like, they're not bare at the wide receiver cupboard. So I'm not saying you can go without a receiver. I'm just saying it's not a necessary evil at one of those two picks. But you got two picks. It makes a ton of sense to make one of those picks a wide receiver. I think edge rusher is the more pressing need, if you want to be honest with you. If you want me to be honest with you, they don't get enough pressure off the edge. Frank Clark is not it. They did rework his deal so that it's a 2-year deal. I think you should be drafting his replacement, if not a guy opposite of him. If you're drafting his replacement, I think the perfect replacement for him is a fellow Michigan Wolverine alum in David Ojabo, who will be there because he's not going to play for you this year, more likely than not. And so everybody is kind of going to steer clear of him as a first-round pick. If you're going to draft David Ojabo, I think you have to do it in the first. Why? Because he's going to miss more likely than not this entire campaign. So you need that 5th-year option on David Ojabo. You'd be foolish to spend a second-round pick on him, knowing that you're going to essentially not have him for the first year of his contract. That, to me, is stupid. If I'm a team like Tampa Bay who can afford to draft a guy and draft and stash him, I'd take a David Ojabo because it's tremendous value. But if I'm the Chiefs, a guy like Ojabo or just an edge rusher in general, Boye Mafe, or Mafe Boye will be a guy that will be available probably back into the first round. That may be intriguing. The kid from Penn State is another guy that will probably be available back into the first round that may be intriguing to the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, wide receiver is another position you can't ignore for the Chiefs. So edge rusher is, to me, at the top of the list for the Chiefs. Then wide receiver. Everyone wants to talk about receiver. Well, they've done some things to alleviate some of the pressure of losing Tyreek Hill. I don't think you have to go receiver with that very first pick. You could use the second one. It doesn't matter. They're back-to-back picks. So receiver, edge rusher, corner is always a problem for the Chiefs. Always, always, always. They never invest draft capital at the position. They're always, to me, they're some of the best moochers in the league. They're leeches when it comes to the cornerback position. You throw something away and they're scooping it up as a former first-round pick. They did it with Mike Hughes, they did it with the Giants first round pick from the Georgia Bulldogs that they ended up releasing after he got into some trouble. That's what they do. They find guys on the scrap heap that you don't believe in anymore. They lost Tyrann Mathieu in free agency. They decided not to bring him back, but they went out and got Justin Reed. So they're fine at the safety position. I think they have to do something at corner. They have to do something at edge rusher and on the offensive side of football, receiver. Those are the positions that they should be looking to upgrade. And then anything else that they decide to do is added. I think they could use some more, juice at linebacker, but they got some young guys that I like, Gay and Bolton. I think they've done enough there that they don't necessarily have to do anything at linebacker. But for me, without a doubt, corner, edge rusher, wide receiver, and they got Noah Gray last year. I like him at the tight end position, but I wouldn't be opposed to adding another tight end if I were them either. But to me, those are the three biggest needs. You move on to the next team in that division, and it's the Vegas Raiders. This is a team that surprised a lot of people, made the playoffs, almost upset the Cincinnati Bengals in Wild Card Weekend, and then they swung for the fences. I thought that their interim head coach, Rich Bisaccia, did a phenomenal job and deserved an opportunity to keep the job. They decided to go in a different direction. I don't blame them, but I thought Bisaccia deserved an opportunity. When's the last time we saw a team deal with the things the Raiders dealt with, bring in an interim coach, and that guy lead you to the playoffs? It just doesn't happen in the NFL. Generally, when you have an interim coach, first and foremost, you stink. Your coach gets fired in season because you're 0-7 or you're 1-6. And it's rare that a team turns it around with the interim head coach. Well, they had Gruden resign. You had Henry Ruggs in his situation. You had your first round cornerback be released because he was doing some nonsense on social media. It was one thing after another, and this team somehow persevered. Either way, now you have Josh McDaniels as your head coach, and you got a new GM. Mike Mayock did not get the job done, and so it's similar to what the Giants did, bringing in a whole Buffalo brain trust. They're doing that with New England in Vegas, and so they get Derek Carr the new deal, which was a necessity. They got the new deal for Max Crosby. That was a necessity. They traded for Devontae Adams. That was out of necessity. They didn't have a number one wide receiver. So, then we heard rumors about where they're going to trade Darren Waller. That's hogwash. To me, you go get Devontae Adams to pair with Darren Waller to give you one of the more formidable offenses in the league, not to mention Hunter Renfrow, who is third in Renfrow around the league, who you can't cover in the red zone and on third downs. Like, they've got almost an unstoppable offense if they can protect Derek Carr and run the football with Josh Jacobs. That's where I think you start on the offensive side of the football. Is you got to shore up the offensive line. There was this mass exodus last offseason where they pretty much revamped the entire offensive line because they couldn't afford to keep all those guys. They started trading pieces away, releasing guys, moving on from Trent Brown and the center who they traded to Seattle or Arizona, one of those two places. Like, they just started just offloading pieces left and right. And the offensive line was okay, but it wasn't good enough. I think you need some offensive line help because you got all these weapons now. You got to be able to get the football to them. I think defensively, the cornerback position is one that you have to take a look at. When Casey Hayward, who is 89 years old, is your best corner, you have problems in the secondary. So I think that's one of the places I would start if I'm Vegas is the secondary, the cornerback position in particular. I don't think you have enough at linebacker, and you've been trying to find pieces there for a while now. I think you have to do something there. And, getting Chandler Jones alleviates the need for an edge rusher opposite of Max Crosby. But I would like to see you do some more on the interior of your defensive line. So you had a bunch of solid guys. A lot of them have dispersed around the league and aren't back in Vegas. So I think that's something else that if I'm the Vegas Raiders, I would look to attack. Clearly, you don't have a first-round pick, so got to see how the board falls to you. But in looking at the Vegas Raiders, Um, Darren Waller is a guy you make sure that you keep clearly. But the guy behind him, I think, is on the last year of his rookie contract, if I'm not mistaken, the tight end from LSU. So I wouldn't be, opposed to maybe sniffing around the tight end position as you get a little bit deeper into the draft. But for me, corner, offensive line, corner, linebacker, and tight end are positions that I would be kind of looking at if I'm the Vegas Raiders. As you go to the next team in that division, and that division is loaded. You go to the Chargers, man, and they were essentially one, or two poor decisions from their head coach away from making the postseason last year. But um, here's the thing: they're going for it. They see the window of opportunity is wide open with Justin Herbert, and they're not wasting any time. And I love the offseason that they've put forth. They were aggressive. They kept Mike Williams, so you keep your own. They were aggressive in going out and getting J.C. Jackson in free agency. They traded for Khalil Mack. They're going for it. And they're not sitting on their hands. They're not saying, oh, we got a franchise quarterback, could be one of the best in the league. No, they're doing what the Bills did with Josh Allen a couple of years ago when they realized we got us a dude. Now let's go surround him with talent and try to win this thing. The Chargers are doing the same exact thing. They got themselves a dude. They realized that now they're trying to push all their chips to the center of the table. I love it, but you still have work to do. I think one of the things you need to do is you need to be aggressive in fortifying the offensive line. We saw what happened at right tackle. Storm Norton was destroyed by Hurricane Max in week 18. That shit can't happen again. So you got Rashawn Slater on one side, stud. You need another guy opposite of him to fortify that offensive line. So I think you start there if you're the Chargers. I think you could use another corner, even though you got J.C. Jackson and you drafted Asante Samuel Jr. last year. I think you could use another corner. I think you could use another wide receiver personally. You got Mike Williams. You have Keenan Allen. Then you got a bunch of dudes. You drafted the kid out of Tennessee last year. I don't love him. Maybe he turns out to be solid for you. Those two can't do it by themselves. You got a bunch of guys that can run really, really fast. How about just adding another substance receiver in that mix? I think would really help them out a ton. So I think receiver is another position that they could go after. Defensive line wise, they were one of the worst at stopping the run last year for a long stretch of time. They got to fortify that front. Khalil Mack's going to do a lot in the way of helping stop the run, but they need interior presence. So I think drafting a guy there, linebacker is another one. Like they might have whiffed at the linebacker position with the kid out of Oklahoma. I just don't think he's giving them what they thought they were going to get. And then, I don't understand why they let Kaiser White leave if the Eagles only gave him like $3 million or something. Like, what are we doing here? So you got to replace him. So I think they've got some issues at linebacker. And again, corner is one that I would take a look at in the mix. So I think there's a lot for the Chargers to do to continue to build this into a bully. But they're well on their way. And I think tight end is another position. You really don't have a dude at tight end. You've got stuff. You don't have a guy. And so I think tight end is something that if I were the Chargers, I think that's the one missing piece. If you added a third option at receiver and a tight end, along with the right tackle, I think your offense is set. You're ready to go if you're the Chargers. And, another thing that I wouldn't mind them adding is a dog at running back. I know they got stuff at running back, but after Austin Eckler, none of that other stuff moves the needle for me. And they've been Larry Roundtree and all these guys, the kid out of UCLA that they took a couple of years ago. Like, none of these dudes move the needle for me. Get you a dog at running back. That would be nice too, but that's a luxury that they don't necessarily need to do. But that's just looking at the Chargers in a nutshell. Then you go to the final team in that division, and it's the Denver Broncos. And honestly, you could argue, sans for the quarterback position, they might have been the most talented team in that division before making the trade for Russell Wilson. Now, clearly, you had to give up some of your talent. Noah Fant, to me, made that offense complete at the tight end position. He's no longer there. You still have Albert O, but he's not Noah Fant. So I think you are missing a piece there. I love Shelby Harris. Had to give him up in the deal as well. So clearly you're going to have to, do some things at those positions because you gave up some of those guys that you really liked. That said, Russell Wilson changes the game in Denver, and the receiver position is already loaded. I think you could do a little something at tight end, moving on from Noah Fant, clearly. Offensive line, you probably could use one or two pieces there. The right tackle position has been rough for them. They thought Juwan James would be the answer, and clearly he was not. So we'll see if they, have an answer there, one on the roster already, or if they decide to add something via the draft. They just signed today. It just happened literally before I came on. Melvin Good in the third to go along with Javonte Williams. I think that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. I love it. So I think they're set there. Defensively, they need some more help edge rusher wise. I think they took the kid Bradley Cooper out of Ohio State last year, and I like him, but I don't love him. Obviously, you lose Shelby Harris on that defensive line on the interior. So I think you could use some more interior defensive line help. Linebacker, you got some stuff at linebacker. I don't love any of it. I like a lot of it. I think you could use an upgrade. And I think in the secondary, you were loaded at one point. Justin Simmons is a stud. And you got all these corners, so much so that I think you had Fuller. Did you trade Fuller? I'm not sure. He was on a 1-year deal, and I don't think he's there anymore. But clearly you drafted the kid out of Alabama, Patrick Surtain. You got O.J. Omudia. I like him. I think you need to add another corner at some point, though. I think you signed you signed the corner from Washington last year to a 3-year deal. And if he can stay healthy, Ronald Darby is a really good piece. So I think you need a nickel more so than anything else. Yeah, I think that's what you really need. So Denver's got, they're talented, man. If they could just figure it out offensively and put some of these pieces defensively in place, they're going to be just fine. But they got a lot of stuff there. But clearly, I think the upgrades need to be to the offensive line, an additional tight end, defensive line, interior-wise, edge rusher. I think you could use some depth at linebacker, and then I think cornerback is another, specifically nickel. But you probably could use another guy out wide, but nickel in particular is where I would be focusing a lot of my energy if I'm the Denver Broncos. So another division down in the AFC. I got a super chat here that I want to take. A couple of super chats, actually, that I want to knock out before we get to the final two divisions in the AFC conference. Mr. Yeto. Victory is mine. Mr. Yeto. What's up? Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Mr. Yeto, writes, what's up, Lou? Thoughts on Jahan Dotson available in the second round? I think Jahan Dotson gets to the second round. I really, truly do. I like him a lot. There was one game that troubled me with him. It was the Michigan game. They were physical with him. He was a non-factor. So he did have a touchdown grab in that game, and that was the touchdown to, if I'm not mistaken, tie the game. It might have been the 2-point conversion they threw to him back shoulder fade wise, or it might have been the touchdown, and then they got the 2-point conversion. Either way, he was a non-factor up until that touchdown grab. So they were physical with him at the line of scrimmage. He's a smaller guy. That really knocked off his timing and rhythm. I think if you can get into his body, you can disrupt him. But when this guy's allowed to run, he's a problem. I like him a lot. I think he's similar to KJ Hamler with just much better hands. And so I think you put him in the right system, I think he would be great in for a team like Arizona. But again, they already got a small guy like that already that they drafted last year. So they don't need another one. They drafted more last year. Did the Elijah? It wasn't Elijah. Who was it? Moore. It was Moore, right? I think it's Moore. The kid out of Purdue. I think it was Moore. Rondale Moore. That's who they drafted. They don't need another one of those. It's like a carbon copy. So, but I think Jahan Dotson would work in a place like Buffalo, would be a great spot for him. They got Jamison Crowder, so they don't need him, but he would have been a perfect complement to what they have set up there. a place like that, I think he'd be great. Tampa would be another great destination for him. They got like a Scotty Miller, but Scotty Miller is more of a deep threat. He's not like a true 3-level wide receiver like Dotson can be for you. He's got some of the best hands in the draft. He's just small. That's it. He can run. He can jump. He's got great hands. He's not much of a blocker. Clearly, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but I love his game. So I think he'd be a great fit for a number of teams. Green Bay would be another place that I think he'd be phenomenal at, but we'll see where he ends up. I think he makes it to the second round, early second round. He's not going to be there for a team like Washington. He didn't get out of the 30s. Just know that. If he doesn't go on, and he's easily a first-round pick, all somebody has to do is fall in love with his game. All it takes is one. But I think he sneaks into the second, but he's gone within the first 6-7 picks of the second round. Barry Curtis Jr., thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Barry Curtis Jr. writes, if Kyle and Stingley are 1 and 2 on your board, you take him. It's how you end up with players like Micah Parsons and why Dallas is so talented. BPA. If you're talking to me, those two are number 1 and number 2 on my board in terms of talent. Stingley is the number 1 talent, the most talented player in this draft class when he's healthy and mentally stimulated. What I saw from him in his freshman year at LSU can't be taught, and I can't forget it. I know it hasn't been clean the last 2 years. But if this kid is focused and he's back to where he was as a freshman at LSU, they're in a better player in this draft class than him. Kyle Hamilton is the real deal. He's a Swiss Army knife that can provide you. And we seem to, in this league, a lot of times, we love to diminish the safety position as if it isn't a big deal. But yet, this offseason, we saw teams going and grabbing safeties up like hotcakes. You know, one team loses the safety, they got to replace him right away. The Saints lost Marcus Williams, they had to go get Marcus May right away. The Chiefs lost Tyrann Mathieu, they had to go get Justin Reed right away. So, you know, the Ravens didn't have the presence at safety that they wanted. They quickly went and got Marcus Williams. Like, we try to diminish safety like it's not important, but we won't let Justin Simmons leave in free agency. We franchise tag him twice. Or you don't let Jesse Bates, the third test free agency, you find a way to hold on to him via the franchise tag. Like, it's funny. We try to make it seem like safety isn't that important, but yet when you get a good one, you hold on to him. I feel like Kyle Hamilton is a guy that can do it all on the football field. And I know the 40 time is going to scare some teams away. Great. Hopefully he falls to my Washington Commanders at 11 and gives them the option to take him because the guy is super talented, irregardless of a 40 time that may not have been as appealing to a lot of people out there. So to me, like you said, the best teams in the draft, they are that way because they don't care about some of the things that other teams base their boards off of. Like, for instance, Cincinnati and Dallas and Jacksonville to a lesser degree. I'm not saying you don't worry about red flags, but you vet players and you figure out what the issue is. You get to the bottom of it, and then you figure out if this is something I can take on, if this baggage is something I can deal with. Cincinnati has done a great job of that. Dallas has done a great job of that. And Jacksonville, to a lesser degree, has done a great job of that. You don't miss out on talent because he's got red flag and character issues. That's the reason Michael Parsons was even there for Dallas at 11, because everyone talked about off the field issues. The kid was a top 5 pick. Who watched his film and couldn't see that? Like, everyone could see it, but yet, he's got off the field issues. So not gonna touch him with a 10-foot pole. He's off my board, and he turns out to be the defensive player of the year. So you got to be able to get past some of that stuff. But anyway, I digress. Let's go to the next AFC division, and it's where we find the Buffalo Bills and the AFC East. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills. This is another team similar to Cincinnati. Man, they might be the most complete team in all of football with the addition of Von Miller. The biggest issue they had was their inability to consistently get to the quarterback. Adding Von Miller, if he's still Von Miller, and at some point he won't be Von Miller anymore, but seeing what we saw in the Super Bowl, he's still Von Miller. And as long as he's still Von Miller, if you pair him with the young kid they took out of Miami, Gregory Rousseau, and you hope he continues to develop. And they picked up the 5th-year option on Ed Oliver. You should have a formidable front that should be able to harass opposing quarterbacks. And if you get leads, which we know that offense is explosive and dynamic enough to get leads, you shouldn't be in a tit for tat like you were in the playoff game against the Chiefs. You should be able to get a stop and win the football game. That said, there aren't many holes. I've talked about running back being a position that they may be interested in. The only clear hole on the roster is cornerback. Cornerback is the one position that they really lack depth or substance at the position. They could use multiple corners, not just one. They could use multiple corners, but they definitely have to draft a starter opposite of Tre'Davious White, who's coming back off of a major injury. So to me, corner, running back is a position of intrigue. You can always use offensive line depth. What team can't? I think interior-wise on the defensive line, they went out and got Tim Settle. I would draft another guy just to be on the safe side anyway. I don't know what they're deciding to do with Ed Oliver, but clearly you just want to continue to have depth on that defensive line. But they drafted a bunch of edge rushers. I don't think they really love what they're getting out of A.J. Epineza, hence the move to go get Von Miller. But I don't think they've given up on he or, Boogie Basham, who they drafted last year. So they got some stuff. If they can develop it, we'll see. At some point, I love your tandem at safety, but those guys are getting up there in age. I think you got to start, drafting guys that can give you some depth at safety as well. But it's a complete roster, man. It's not a lot that they got tight ends. I think you should be in the market for another tight end, right? But I love Dawson Knox, but he's been inconsistent at times. But I think you should be in the market for another tight end. But then you got OJ Howard in free agency. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a complete team. I don't see a lot of holes. Corner, running back, safety, defensive tackle are all positions that I wouldn't mind. And maybe even linebacker to a lesser degree, I wouldn't mind throwing a pick or two at. But this is a really good, complete top to bottom roster here. With all the moves made in free agency. I talked about the Chargers pushing their chips in. This is a Bills team that's doing similar things, going out and getting Von Miller, getting Jamison Crowder after moving on from Cole Beasley. This is a team that has positioned themselves, OJ Howard at tight end, that has positioned themselves to really go all in. And we'll see if they're able to get that done or not. But they're one of those teams that they can really do whatever the hell they want to do. It's a luxury what they're doing. So Buffalo's in a really good spot. Next team in that division, the New England Patriots. Last year, again, what a difference a year makes. Last year, coming into the draft, they were the laughing stock of that division. They had all this money. They went into free agency. They spent like crazy. Belichick was pissed off. The narrative was he couldn't win without Brady. They get Mac Jones. He falls to him in the draft at 15. He changes the fortunes of that team very quickly. Defensively, he got some pieces, but they're still lacking the pieces that he needs to turn that defense into what he wants to turn it into. But they had a streak there where they were shutting teams down, clobbering teams defensively, and running the football. I still think that when I look at the Patriots, one of their biggest deficiencies on offense, they got all these receivers. None of them are a number one. Jacoby Myers is cool at best, and this is on his best day. He's a number two. He's probably more of a number three. Nelson Aguilar at his best is a number two. He's probably a third option at this point of his career. But he can be a number two. We saw that in Vegas. He was a really quality number two for them, and he parlayed that into a deal. I love Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne at best is a number two, probably more of a number three option. So you see where I'm going. They got a bunch of these dudes on their roster. Nobody clearly a number one. I think that's where they're lacking. So, but they do a terrible job of drafting receivers in New England. That's part of the reason why they go get them from elsewhere. They don't do a good job of identifying talent at receiver and bringing them into the fold in New England. So I wouldn't trust them. The last time they tried to do this, it was N'Keal Harry. Like, I wouldn't trust them with a 10-foot pole to get this thing right at receiver. So I don't even know if that's something they want to do. Corner clearly is an issue now. No more Stephon Gilmore, no more J.C. Jackson. You got to do something. That's the heart and soul of what Bill Belichick likes to do defensively. So corner, to me, might be the first need on the board. Linebacker, they're in a perfect spot to get a guy like Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean. And I think Devin Lloyd is the perfect piece. Him and Daxton Hill, to me, are the quintessential New England Patriots, like guys you don't want Belichick to get his hands on because he's going to turn those guys into lethal weapons. And they could use both of them, a linebacker and a safety and a corner. These are all needs on the defensive side of the football for the New England Patriots. I continue to say this. I've been saying this for years, for decades even, with the Patriots. They don't have an elite pass rusher. I love what Matthew Judon brings to the table, and he's a problem, okay? And Belichick's getting a lot out of him, but they still don't have an elite edge rusher. They still could use another guy that can get to the quarterback consistently. They've never really truly had that. So that's something else that they could use on the defensive side of the football. On the offensive side of the football, I think offensive line is a big need for them. They just need to fill out that offensive line. They've got guys all over the place. They've got pieces here and there, but they traded Shaq Mason. Ted Karras is gone. They just need to just fill in, even if it's just for depth purposes, they need to fortify that offensive line in front of Mac Jones, because we know the miggity Mac, bo, he's not going anywhere, right? So you need to protect him. I think they're fine at running back. I think they're fine at tight end. They spent all that draft capital. They better be, free agent money at the tight end position. They better be. And they're fine there with between Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. They're fine at tight end. So for me, running back is fine. Tight end is fine. I think receiver, they desperately need a number one to kind of realign all the rest of those receivers. Offensive line needs more depth. And then you get to the defensive side, and I think they could use a defender at every level. I think they could use a safety, a corner, a linebacker, and an edge rusher. So they got work to do on that side of the football, but they're not that far off, as we saw last year. The Patriots are not. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, next team in that division is the Miami Dolphins, and what an offseason it's been for the Miami Dolphins. So first order of business is to get out of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. You firmly planted yourself in there during the season. You met with him, and you decided Tua's our guy. So you move on from your head coach because he doesn't believe Tua's the guy. He wants to go and get Deshaun Watson, and you're like, no. We spent draft capital on Tua. We believe in Tua, and if you don't believe in Tua, then we got to move on. So they did. He's suing them and the rest of the league for that matter. And so there's that. Then do you believe in Tua? I don't know. We're going to see. Clearly the ownership does, but does the coaching staff believe in Tua? We're going to find out. So that's an issue onto itself. But people want to talk about the offense and Tua this, Tua that. The offensive line stinks. Let's call a spade a spade. The reason they couldn't throw a 15-yard pass and had to throw all these passes at the line of scrimmage and get it out of Tua's hands like hot potato is because the offensive line was a sieve. And yet they spent all this draft capital. I told them not to spend a first-round pick on Austin Jackson. They did not listen. So they've spent all this draft capital on the offensive line. It has not worked out for them. So now I think if I'm not mistaken, did they sign Teron Armstead? One of those Florida teams signed Teron Armstead. I'm going to find out right now and see where he is. Miami signed Teron Armstead, which it's a gift and a curse. You feel like you've fixed the left tackle position, but this guy's going to miss at minimum 6 games this season. I want to look up his stats and see how many games he started the last let's go 3-4 years, because this dude stay missing some games. Let's see. He missed 9 games last year, only 2 the year before that. I guess it felt like more. 2 the year before that, 1 the year before that. Then he missed 6 each of the 2 years previous to that. He missed 9 the year before that. So yeah, this is a guy that is going to miss games. He's never played a full season in his NFL career. Never. Not one time has he played 16 or 17 last year in his career. So he's going to get hurt at some point, be playing through injury and miss some time. But yeah, you got your left tackle in Teron Armstead. They went out and got, of course, one of the biggest splash moves of the offseason, trading for Tyreek Hill. So there's no excuse if Teron Armstead is there at left tackle and you feel like, and they still probably have more work to do along that offensive line. But the weapons that they have. They had so many weapons. And I talked about the Patriots needing a number one. They traded for Devontae Parker from the Dolphins. He's not a number one receiver either. He has number one traits. He's not a number one wide receiver. But I think they're going to go into the season feeling like, oh, we got a number one wide receiver now. Good luck with that. You're going to need it. Bottom line is they had so many weapons in Miami that they could just give away Devontae Parker, essentially, because they had Waddle and they had Tyreek Hill, and they got Preston Williams, and they got all these guys at the receiver position that they've drafted that they really like. And now you add Tyreek Hill to the mix. They got a budding star at the tight end position in Mike Gesicki. So and they drafted the kid Hunter Long out of BC last year. They're loaded at tight end. They're loaded at receiver. They finally did something at running back. God, I kept begging them to do something at running back. They go out and get Chase Edmonds in free agency. I'd double down and still draft a running back, but that's a start. That's a great start, getting Chase Edmonds at running back. The offensive line is a problem. You're going to have to spend draft capital there. Defensively, you got to get to the quarterback, man. That's one of the biggest problems in Miami. Emmanuel Ogbah was great for you last year. You re-signed him. That's cool. You need another dude. Linebacker, it's fine. I think you could use a piece or two, but you love Jerome Baker. We'll see what else you decide to do there. The Ohio State pipeline thing didn't work for you. Raekwon McMillan didn't pan out for you there. But the bottom line is you could use another linebacker. You got some stuff there. Andrew Van Ginkel has been playing really well for you. You've got some stuff there, but I think you could use another guy. And then clearly the secondary, you've spent a ton of money there between your two starting corners. You drafted Noah Igbenogany a couple of years ago in the first round. So you've spent free agent dollars, draft capital there, because that was one of the staples of any coach coming from New England is I got to have corners. I got to be able to play man-to-man on the outside so I can be aggressive defensively. Well, we'll see if that philosophy changes now that you have a new coach. But one thing's for sure, Javon Holland was a stud at safety, so I don't think that's necessarily a big need. For me, the big needs come in the front seven, specifically on the defensive line, and also at linebacker. I think you could use some more depth there. And then offensively, the line is where you need to spend a ton of your resources. You already went out and got Teron Armstead. Do not stop there. If I'm not mistaken, you signed Connor Williams. That's a mistake. He stinks. You might as well go and draft a guy if you think Connor Williams is going to come in and shore up either one of your guard spots. That's a big mistake because he is trash. So they've got some work to do on that offensive line. And I think they still need to invest in the running back position when it's all said and done. So I like what they've done, but they need to protect Tua to give him a fighting chance to see what they truly have offensively. With all those weapons, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki, that offense should be lethal. But if you can't protect for 3 seconds, what difference does it make? They've got to protect better, and it'd be nice to give him a running back that he can turn around and hand the ball to that is a difference maker. Chase Edmonds, great start. I think you need to add another guy. We'll see. So that takes care of the Dolphins, and then we wrap up the AFC East with the Jets. So this is another one of those teams. I think they are tired of waiting at this point. Joe Douglas is getting to the point now where he's like, okay, my seat's going to get hot if we don't start winning some games. So I think he is now at the point where he's like, okay, got the young quarterback, took his lumps last year. We need him to step up this year. Like, they're going to start putting pressure on dudes to perform at a high level. They're not waiting anymore. So you got the head coach in Robert Saleh, and they were competitive in some games last year. They won a game or two, like the Bengals, that you and the Titans. Like, some of their wins were epic, but their losses were ass thrashing. Okay, they were some ass thrashing beatdowns. They gave up 50 points multiple times last year, 40 a couple of times, I believe. There were some ass whoopings in there, right? Old school ass whoopings too. And so there needs to be them bridging that gap. More competitive football, less turnovers, less mistakes. They feel like they got their quarterback. They went out and were aggressive at the tight end position. They went out and got two. They got one from the Vikings, who I really like. I I think it's Eric something. I can't think of his last name, but he's really good. And then they got CJ Uzama. So that's a safety blanket for any young quarterback to get the tight end position squared away. Clearly, they got some guys at receiver that they like. Braxton Berrios is back. I thought he played well last year. You got Corey Davis, and you have Elijah Moore. But clearly, Joe Douglas wants to add. It's not enough. He wants to add another receiver, and he will, whether it's via the draft or he trades for Deebo Samuel. They're going to add another receiver to give him a true number one threat. Cool. I love it. I love it. The offensive line question. So you spent a top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken, on Mekhi Becton. And he was hurt last year, but then there were some other issues with him. I need him to get his shit together. You couldn't have known that George Fant was going to turn out to be your best offensive lineman last year, but he was fantastic for the Jets last season when he had to play left tackle. So now they're like, hey, Mekhi, about left tackle, we might leave George over there, but we might put you at right tackle. So we're going to see what they decide to do. Either way, they need to get their best five on the field. You drafted Elijah Vera Tucker last year, so I think the makings of that offensive line is there. You just got to keep them healthy, and you got to get continuity, get the right five on the field, and get them playing at a high level. I still think you can spend some more draft capital on that offensive line. You can never have enough when you got a young quarterback. And, they spent some draft capital on the running back position last year with Michael Carter. I wouldn't be opposed to doing anything there. But, if you're bringing back the home run threat, Tevin Coleman, and you have Michael Carter, and you might have one or two other pieces that you like. I don't think running back is necessarily a big need. So tight end taken care of. You're going to address wide receiver. Offensive line, to me, is something that needs to be addressed. I think you then go to the defensive side of the football. Edge rusher. Got to have it. Got to have it. I need it in the worst way right after a long day. Got to have it. You thought you were going to get something out of the kid from Cincinnati that you signed in free agency, and boom, just like that, he tears his ACL. He's done. So he's coming back. You're hoping that he can give you a little something. You're going to draft somebody in the top 10 of this draft, more likely than not at 4, to get some pressure off the edge. Bryce Hall stepped up again, just like George Fant. You couldn't have known you were going to get what you got out of Bryce Hall last year. He was fantastic at the cornerback position, and we knew that was in there with him. He had some injuries at UVA, pushed him down draft boards a couple of years ago, but the talent was there, and you're starting to see it come to fruition. But you can get him to continue to play at a high level like that. You got the safety Mike Edwards from the Buccaneers in free agency. And so you're trying to build that secondary. You need another corner, okay? You need another corner. You need another edge rusher. You need another receiver. These are all things, and you need the offensive line. These are all things the Jets should be honing in on. Linebacker is something that actually Quincy Williams played really well for you after you got him from Jacksonville. And so I just edge rusher, getting to the quarterback, cornerback, wide receiver, offensive line. Those to me are your focuses if you're the Jets. There may be one or two other positions in there that you could use, but all in all, those are the ones you should be focusing in on. And then you just try to hit the ground running if you're the Jets. So now we move on to the final division that we'll cover. And that's the worst division in football, if you ask me. This is why I left them for last. Usually you save your best for last. We're going to save the worst for last. If we've been running from it, it's the AFC South. So you start with the champions of that division, and that would be the Tennessee Titans. Their biggest problem is their quarterback isn't good enough to take them where they want to go. They got a running game. They got an offensive line. I think the first thing I do if I'm Tennessee is I take a hard, long look at Ryan Tannehill. Do I believe in him? I think the answer has to be no at this point. Do you do something about it? Maybe. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. If you decide not to, though, you best go all in at the receiver position because you traded for Robert Woods. Great. I love it. You still need more. Okay. You still need more. A.J. Brown is awaiting a new deal. That's going to get done. He's not going anywhere. You traded for Robert Woods. I still say you add another wide receiver. Okay. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be in the draft, although I would make it a drafted player. Cole Beasley is still out there as far as I'm concerned. You need a nickel, a slot receiver. A veteran too, because you're a veteran team. It sounds like a match made in heaven to me, but I still would draft a guy. I would not allow that to stop me from drafting another receiver if I'm the Tennessee Titans. So I think wide receiver is a must for them. I think you have to, as I mentioned already, you have to take a look at the quarterback position. Defensively, I thought your front was awesome last year. I mean, you got you got the guy in free agency from the Colts, who really made a huge difference up front as a defensive end/tackle. God, I don't know why his name is escaping me, but I started with the Raiders. He was fantastic for you last year. Then you got your edge rusher. You just paid him a boatload of money. And I said this, I said he's the most natural pass rusher. Harold Landry was in that like 2019 draft or whatever it was. I said he's the most natural pass rusher in this draft class. And he started to show it last year. He was phenomenal. You just paid him a boatload of money. So, and he well-deserved. So the pressure was outstanding for the Titans last year. I talked about them sacking Joe Burrow 8 times in that playoff game. The linebacker position is a problem, though. They don't have enough at linebacker. And if I'm not mistaken, they just moved on from their middle linebacker, if I'm not mistaken. He might have been back. He might be back on a 1-year deal. I think they moved on from him. Either way, I think linebacker, whether he's back or not, is a position of need. I think that the secondary, they didn't get enough out of their secondary. And they spent the first-round pick on the Virginia Tech corner, Caleb Farley. He was all kinds of banged up last year. It wasn't enough. They need more out of that cornerback position. I think you got to spend more draft capital there. I think you are fine at safety. I wouldn't mind investing another pick, but I think you're fine at safety. Corner is a big deal. Linebacker is a big deal. Offensive line, I think you could add a piece or two there. But receiver, quarterback, cornerback, linebacker are, to me, the biggest needs. And I think you have to add a tight end. I loved Ferkser going into the year last year. I was like, all right, Ferkser, you about to get your chance to show everybody you can play. And then he got his ass whooped last year. And I'm like, okay, you're a number 2 tight end. That's what that said to me. Anthony Ferkser is not a number 1. He is a number 2. And that is okay. That is okay. So you need a tight end. You need receiver help. You need cornerback help. You need linebacker help. And I think you could take a look at both quarterback and offensive line as well. But that's what I see for the Tennessee Titans. Then I go to the next team in that division. It's the Indianapolis Colts. What an offseason they've had, right? So this is crazy. I look at this team, and the quarterback position clearly is a problem. They got Matt Ryan. That's a Band-Aid solution, right? Like this wound needs more than a Band-Aid solution. You did it 2 years ago with Phillip Rivers. You did it last year with Carson Wentz. You thought he was the answer. Clearly, there was a disconnect between the front office and Carson Wentz. He's no longer there. You get Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's on the downswing of his career. He can still help, right? He can still help, but that's not the answer. So if I'm Indianapolis, I don't think this is the year you look for an answer. But in the back of your mind, you have to be thinking about that. I think up front, you have to address the offensive line. It's funny because we talk about JT and his dominance on the ground, but they were one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in all of football. You know, they signed Fisher from the Chiefs, Eric Fisher, and he was a turnstile last year. He got his ass whooped. And there were some really impactful games where he got his ass destroyed. And the Tampa Bay game comes to mind. They were destroying Tampa Bay, and in one fell swoop, he gets beat. Forced fumble, game change, and it was never the same. They ultimately lose that game. They need to upgrade and address the offensive line, okay? So that's something I think they need to definitely do in Indianapolis. That's one thing. Receiver is a problem for me. It's been a problem for me. Everybody wants to talk about Carson Wentz. Everybody wants to talk about this, that, and third. They have never actually put forth what I felt like is proper effort to give whomever's under center the right targets to throw the football to. I get it. You spent a second-round pick on Michael Pittman Jr. He's the best you got, okay? And he's proven to be worthy of that second-round selection. But you have gotten nothing out of the Ohio State product, Paris Campbell. He can't stay healthy to save his life. T.Y. Hilton is done. I wouldn't bring him back, but we'll see what they decide to do. You got to do something. Like, it can't be, Ashton Doolin and all of these retread wide receivers from random places. Like, you have to stop throwing draft capital at 5th round receivers out of Northern Iowa and actually say, okay, enough's enough. Let's get a guy. Let's get a dude at receiver. You still don't. I think Michael Pittman Jr. is one of the highest level number 2 wide receivers we have in this game. And if you want to stretch it, he can be a low level 1. Okay. I liken him to Alshon Jeffrey in terms of what Jeffrey was in his career. Jeffrey was never to me any more than a high level, a low level number 1, but he was more of a number 2. But at his peak, he was a low level 1. That's Michael Pittman's ceiling. I think he's more of a number 2. You need another dude at receiver. Okay. Jack Doyle retires. You bring back Mo Alley Cox. You need another tight end. Okay. You got the kid last year from SMU. I like him. Okay. And I think there's something there with him. I think you still need to add another tight end. So you need receiver help. You need offensive line help. I think you could add another tight end. Then you go to the defensive side of the football. This is where things get interesting because they're good defensively. And they have pieces at every level that could be game-changing. And I think the move to get Stephon Gilmore really fortifies that defense in the back end because they're going to get back a safety that not a lot of people know about that I think is so good. He was so good in his rookie season in Blackman, and nobody was talking about him, and he kind of got lost in the sauce. Then he tears his ACL early, and it's easy to forget about him. But I thought Julian Blackman out of Utah was phenomenal. So you get him back, and if you can get him back to where he was, you add Stephon Gilmore. You moved on from Rock Ya-Sin, but you add Stephon Gilmore. There's some stuff in that secondary. I love what you have at linebacker between Bobby. I'm trying to get his name right. It's not Orike. It's Okereke. Bobby Okereke. And between him and the maniac, Darius Leonard, you got dogs at linebacker. So I like what you have at linebacker. The defensive line is interesting. I love Grover Stewart. Love him. Love him. Love him. He's a dog. I take him on my team 10 times out of 10. Love him. I love what you have in, of course, Defoe. The leader, sets the tone, space eater, can get to the quarterback. Love it. I don't love what you have coming off the edges. Here's the problem in Indianapolis. You don't apply enough pressure off the edges, and it's not for a lack of trying. You went out and you got Odangbo last year. I like that kid. He's long. He's athletic. There's a lot to like there. You drafted the kid in the first round out of Michigan last year. I can see his face. I can't see his name. He's still a developing prospect. I thought he was super raw, and so anybody that took him, I thought, okay, you're willing to invest time and energy in him because he's not ready to help you right out. He's not coming out of the gate with 7.5 sacks. I don't know how many he had last year, but I'd say it was less than 6. But I think there's upside there. But I need more. It's not enough. I need more. So if I'm Indy, to me, the missing piece defensively is more pressure on the quarterback. Because if they continue, even though Matt Eberflus is no longer there, if they continue the same brand of defense, and I don't know what they did as the defensive coordinator, did they promote from within, or did they get somebody from the outside that has a different philosophy defensively? If it's the same type of guy, if it's the same mindset, play coverage, keep everything in front of us, don't give up explosive plays. You need to be able to get to the quarterback if you're going to play that kind of defense. So for me, with the Indianapolis Colts, clearly you have to protect Matt Ryan. Okay, you thought Carson Wentz last year, under pressure, this, that, and third. Matt Ryan's a sitting duck, similar to what you had 2 years ago with Phillip Rivers. Right? He's not running anywhere. So you better be able to protect him because Carson Wentz saved you from a lot of sacks last year. And he got sacked a ton, and he still saved your ass from a bunch more. So you better fortify the offensive line. I think you need to add another tight end. You definitely need to add another receiver, okay? And then you go to the defensive side of football. I think you need another edge rusher. I love what you got at linebacker. You add in another corner. I think you could add another corner. And I think you're fine at safety. If you get Julian Blackman back healthy, I love the kid that you got from Michigan State a couple of years ago. I think your defense is is good. Just a few pieces, a few tweaks here and there, and you'll be fine. So for me, offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, edge rusher, and anywhere else that you feel like is another position you want to throw some depth at, knock yourself out. But those are the four that I would really go after heavy if I'm Indianapolis. Next team in that division is the Houston Texans. And they're like the Detroit Lions. They're like, the Seattle Seahawks. To me, just one of these teams. Let's just add as much shit as we can add. We need everything. We need one of everything, two of some things. Look, your goal is to get as many good football players as you can. You got to pick at number 3, add a good football player. You got to pick at 13, add another good football player, and just keep going. That's where you are if you're the Houston Texans. And really this year is about finding out about Davis Mills. Love that you brought back Brandon Cooks. He was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. You took the kid from Michigan last year. You'd like to see him develop in year 2. Offensive line wise, you could probably add another piece there because that's another team where I just like, shit, how many offensive linemen can you draft and still not have what you need at offensive line? Miami and Atlanta and the Texans, like, damn, how many offensive linemen can you draft in the first 2 rounds and still not have what you need? But they're still in that position where you're like, hey, we still need another dude up front. So I like the addition of Marlon Mack. That was a quiet addition. No one's talking about. I think he's going to play really well for them this year. So I think really offensive line, you still need more stuff at wide receiver. You probably could add another dude at tight end, even though you got a couple of young guys at tight end. You probably could add another one. I mean, again, you could add one of everything. It won't hurt. Defensive line wise, you got to get to the quarterback. One of your biggest issues, you can't get to the quarterback. You don't have any edge rushers. So I think you need an edge rusher. You probably need 2 of them, but just one, to get you started. Corner is another position. I actually like what Lonnie Walker did a lot last year. I thought Lonnie Walker started to come of age last season. Still need more cornerback help. Clearly, you lose Justin Reed in free agency. Need to replace him. So I think you need safety help. And also, I think you could use more linebacker help. You moved on from Zach Cunningham in season. And so I think, linebacker is another one of those positions. You need everything. I've said this already. You need safety, corner, linebacker, defensive line, offensive line, wide receiver. You could use one of everything pretty much. So, and then you want to find out about Davis Mills. So that's where the Texans are. And to wrap up this breakdown, you got Jacksonville. Look, they're another team that's intriguing to me. I don't think they're in the same boat, though, as crazy as this may sound. For years, I would say Jacksonville, they have a luxury. They got a roster that's full of talent. Their problem was quarterback. Every year you look at Jacksonville's roster, you go, what the F, man? They got all these talented players, whether they can't stay healthy or whatever, or their coaching's bad, but they never had a quarterback. So now you got the quarterback. Now you got the head coach. I think they got the right guy, Doug Peterson. I love that move. I think that's the biggest offseason acquisition they could have made, was finding the right guy as the head coach. I still think there may be some issues in the front office with Trent Baalke. We'll see if they sort themselves out or not. But the roster is not bare. The cupboard is not bare in Jacksonville. Hear me when I speak. I wouldn't be shocked if Jacksonville won 9 games this year. I wouldn't be, because I look at Trevor Lawrence. I say, okay, he's talented. And now they got a guy that can extract all of that talent out of him in Doug Peterson. Offensive line wise, I still think there could be some things done there. And they'll probably look to do that at some point during this draft. But you look at the wide receiver position, they moved on from DJ Chark, but they went out and they got the receiver from Arizona, paid him a boatload of money, Christian Kirk. They still have a guy that I thought was exceptional for them last year in Marvin Jones. You got Laviska Shenault. Like, there's a lot at receiver, and maybe you add one more guy in there if you feel the need to. But I think they've got a good working foundation at receiver that you don't feel the need to really be aggressive there. Tight end, I love that they traded. Now, this is one of the few things Urban Meyer did. Have you heard some of the stories that have come out about this dude? And have you heard the players talking cold, hard cash about him since he's been fired? I mean, they should do a 30 for 30 on Urban Meyer's lone year in Jacksonville. That would be some compelling television. But one of the few moves he made that was of substance was getting the tight end Dan Arnold. I love Dan Arnold. I don't know what it is about Dan Arnold, but I freaking love that guy. And he can play some football, and he helps. So I think you got some stuff at tight end. Maybe you need to add another tight end to the mix. But I like Dan Arnold. Obviously, like Travis Etienne is like a whole nother first-round pick all over again because he didn't play last year. So you're adding that into your backfield, an infusion of speed and athleticism and a friendly face for Trevor Lawrence in that backfield. I go to the defensive side of the football. This is where the bulk of the work needs to be done, but it's crazy. This is the same Jacksonville defense that held the high-powered Buffalo Bills to 6 points. It's the same Jacksonville Jaguars that, in the face of having nothing but an offseason in front of them, took the Indianapolis Colts and reduced them to next to nothing and won that football game. At times, their defense could be dominant. Now, they need an edge rusher opposite of Josh Allen. The kid that they took out of LSU, I thought he was going to be better, but I told you he was super raw and he needed more time to develop, and he left school way too early. And the NFL is not the place for you to develop if you don't have the skill set yet, if your body isn't right yet. Like, this isn't college basketball and to the NBA where you can work on your frame and all that stuff and try to get minutes. The NFL, it's a grown man's league, which is why they don't let you come straight from high school one and done or 1 year. It's a man's league, and he's not cutting it. So they're going to have to find another edge rusher opposite of Josh Allen. The linebacker position is interesting because there's no more Miles Jack. He's now in Pittsburgh, and I just think it's a total overhaul that needs to be done there. They moved on from Joe Schobert. They moved on from Quincy Williams. They need linebackers. They need them like not like now, like right now. So linebacker is a big problem for me. And then you go to the secondary. They drafted C.J. Henderson. He's not there anymore. Okay, they traded him for Dan Arnold and whatever else they ended up getting. They drafted the kid out of Georgia last year in the second round, or was he in the first round? I want to say he was a second, early second round pick, like 33 overall. Tyson Campbell. I like Tyson Campbell. I like him a lot. I still think you need to add more to that secondary. So I think the secondary safety is fine. I don't think you need to do anything necessarily drastic at safety. They went out and got the kid from the Chargers in free agency a couple of years ago, and he's solid. I think they're fine at safety. I think corner is another position you have to really address. Linebacker is a position, and edge rusher is another position you have to address. And then offensive line for Trevor Lawrence, you have to protect him. And I think you could add a receiver. You don't have to, but I think you could. I think you could add another tight end. But this team is not that far away. Not like you think. And they went out and got Brandon Sheriff in the offseason as well on the offensive line. Like, I think they spent some free agent dollars, acquired some dudes. I may be let me go look at Jacksonville's free agency haul because I really think they were aggressive, and I think that they may not be as far off as I think. So they got Fosaye Oluokun from Atlanta. I really like him. So I remember I talked about their linebacker cupboard was bare. They filled it. They went out and got cornerback Darius Williams, who I love, from the Rams. So that takes that need off. Foley Fatukasi from the Jets. So that's that defensive line that I talked about. Zay Jones at receiver. They got him from Vegas. So they did some work. Evan Ingram at tight end. Remember I said they needed to add? No, they don't. So I told you, they're not as far off as you think. They went out and got Arden Key. I don't know how I feel about that yet because he had a resurgence in San Francisco last year that Arden Key had the most sacks of his career. Now they think that he's ready to start blooming and blossoming. We'll see. Maybe it was because he was around some dogs defensively in San Francisco that made his job a lot easier. We'll see. But they did some stuff. They did some work in free agency. So even all of the positions I just named, maybe they don't even need. They clearly addressed corner, they addressed offensive line, they addressed edge rusher, they addressed linebacker. They still could address some of those positions with more players, but be careful with these Jaguars, man. They're not as far off as one may think. So Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for gym dropping session. I mean, social media maneuvers, we've already pretty much handled that. Well, I've been taking comments, while I've been doing the show, but I think I might have a few more super chats. So let's go back through here. And if there are, I'll clean those up. If not, we'll get out of here because we're going on 3 hours, which I knew this was going to be a super, super long, because I talked about all 32 teams. I told you, super draft extravaganza. So you knew it was going to be long anyway. Justin Clemens, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy, Justin. Writes, good evening, Lou. Good evening, Justin. He says, what's our record next year, you think? I mean, it's hard to say. I got to see what else we do this offseason before I start predicting records. Got to see the schedule. I mean, that's an exercise in futility. I don't really love playing the schedule game, but we'll see. After the dust settles, the smoke clears with the roster, and we pretty much got what we're going to take into the season, then I'll be able to start talking with reckless abandon about what I think the team's prospects for the season are. And then we'll go from there. But I can't give you anything now because we still have a draft. We still have the back end of free agency because, believe it or not, if Washington only comes out of this draft with 6 or 7 players, they've still got work to do. And they're going to get some more money post June 1 that hits the cap. And I think they may be aggressive with some guys that may, because after the draft, teams acquire players, they cut other guys that, they don't no longer have use for. So this roster could look vastly different, in the next 2 months. So we'll see. Stevie, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Stevie, I think you were trying to say something. I don't see a comment from you, but either you were trying to say something or you just wanted to support. Either way, I appreciate you, Stevie. Thank you for the super chat. AJSTP003, thank you for the super sticker. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for the super sticker, AJSTP003. I think that might be the last one, and it is. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 257th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Wow, that was a marathon, but again, I knew it was going to be. So with that said, if you're a Washington fan, I will see you tomorrow night for what will be a great show talking all about the draft on the eve of the 2022 NFL draft. And then Thursday, I hope you join yours truly. And I know a lot of you will be hopping around. There are so many options. When I first started in this game, there weren't many people doing what I do. I mean, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 other YouTubers, content creators. I hate when people call us YouTubers. Content creators. We're content creators. I always have to correct my wife. She's like, yeah, he's a YouTuber. No. I'm a content creator. YouTube sounds so trivial. He's a YouTuber. Sounds like I'm in my basement just doing some shit. I put too much effort in to be called a YouTuber. I'm a content creator. Anyway, there weren't many content creators doing what I do, draft parties. I was like that's why if you go back in the archives, I think my 2017 draft party, might be 2017, might be 2016, is my biggest video to date. It's like 50,000 views or whatever. Because nobody else was live streaming, and it's terrible quality. When I go back, I'm like, who tuned into this? This is terrible. But nobody else was doing it. It wasn't a lot of options. Now, everybody and their mama's live streaming for the draft, and that's cool. I embrace that. But it just means there's more options. But hopefully, even if you're, jumping around from party to party, like you're bar hopping, essentially, draft hopping, and you're just going from channel to channel, just make sure you stop in and kick it with the kid for a little while. That's it. That's all I ask. But hopefully you'll be watching the draft with me. You know what it is. It's a party. Bring refreshments. I'm going to bring my wine. I always got my wine locked, stocked, and loaded for the draft. And we're going to chop it up and have a great time watching this thing unfold. Hopefully you'll join me for days 1 and 2. Remember, I'm back on Fridays for the draft. I don't do Saturday, but I'll be here for days 1 and 2 of the draft, as I always am. And I hope you'll be able to join me for the draft party as well. So with that said, you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. My Grizzlies got the win, so I am on cloud 9 right now, probably a little too amped to sleep, but I need to get some rest, and I'll recharge the battery so that I can come back and do it again tomorrow with the Washington Commander fans in attendance. It should be a ton of fun. And then Thursday, like I usually lose my voice this week. I always lose my voice because you got to think the draft is every bit of 3-4 hours the first day, and then it's another 3-4 hours the second day. And then I'm doing all videos every day leading up to the draft. So I'm going to try to preserve my voice. That's what I usually do the week of the draft. Not a lot of talking, not a lot of yelling. I yelled at the TV way too much tonight. So I'm going to have to take it easy the next couple of days. But in any event, you guys enjoy the rest of your evening as I will. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you for kicking it with the kid this late. But it was still great, even late. Look forward to chopping it up with you next time. You know what it is. Get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man, Louie T. Until next time, God bless and good night.
LouieTeeNetwork.